I think we're ready. Are there people from outside who want to come in? I feel like the queen doing this. Yeah, we'll give them another minute. It's not, well, it's just now 6 o'clock, so.
I mean, we have
Yeah. Okay, yeah. No, well, no, wait. We just want y'all in here. We have to open the meeting and all that, so thank you.
Pledge of Allegiance works.
You know. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting to order. If we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Higley.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Vice Mayor Harrod.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here. So if you could join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if someone would move to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Report on closed session. We did not have a closed session. We had a fun session instead, so. So now we have announcements and presentations. So we have a proclamation, several. But we'll start with the proclamation of the City Council, City of Healdsburg proclaiming June 2025 as LGBTQIA+ Pride Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas the LGBTQIA+, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and others communities are a vital, vibrant, and enduring part of the social, cultural, economic, and civic life of Healdsburg. LGBTQIA+ individuals are our neighbors, family members, friends, co-workers, and community members. They serve as elected and appointed officials, professionals, business owners, educators, students, first responders, and volunteers who contribute daily to the strength and prosperity of our city. And every June, we celebrate International Pride Month, commemorating the Stonewall Uprising of June 28, 1969, where brave activists, including Black trans women like Martha P. Johnson, rose up against police brutality and systematic oppression. That act of resistance sparked a global movement for LGBTQIA+ civil rights that continues today as we march, organize, and advocate for full equality and justice. And in recent years, are we feedback? Back up, okay, sorry. In recent years, with growing intensity in the present day, LGBTQIA+ communities, particularly transgender and non-binary individuals, youth, and people of color, have been the targets of increasing hostility, including discriminatory laws, hate-fueled rhetoric, and policies designed to roll back hard-won rights. These attacks do not reflect the values of Healdsburg. The City of Healdsburg stands firmly in opposition to these regressive efforts and reaffirms its unwavering commitment to protect and uplift LGBTQIA+ individuals. We honor the dignity, visibility, and resilience of the LGBTQIA+ community and acknowledge Pride is a celebration and also a call to action and a reminder that equality requires constant vigilance. And California continues to lead in defending LGBTQIA rights, and Healdsburg proudly joins that legacy by continuing to foster a city that is inclusive, affirming, and welcoming to all people, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. So now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby proclaims June 2025 as LGBTQIA+ Pride Month in the City of Healdsburg. And I think Christian and Ozzy Jimenez Silberg are going to receive the proclamation.
Thank you. Thank you to the City of Healdsburg, City Council, and Mayor Mitchell for this proclamation for June LGBTQ+ Pride Month. This year has been an extremely heavy and tough for our LGBTQ+ community and all marginalized communities. In 2025, over 575 anti-LGBTQ+ bills have been introduced in state legislatures across the U.S., targeting our trans community specifically. We cannot stand silent. LGBTQ+ people are not asking for more rights than anyone. We are asking for the same rights as everyone. We are your neighbors, fellow business owners. We are parents, and we contribute to our society. We should be treated and respected and valued with compassion. We shouldn't have to worry if our marriages could be dissolved depending on who is in charge of our country or states. We shouldn't have to worry if our son could lose his 2 queer fathers if some judge decides it so. This is a real anxiety that LGBTQ+ families face. This proclamation from this council is so meaningful, right, Henry? This proclamation from the council is so meaningful to our community, especially at this time. We need fierce allyship now more than ever. We need all marginalized communities to stand united against hate and bigotry. We have an elite small group of billionaires that want us divided, fighting amongst ourselves instead of focusing on their greed. J.R.R. Tolkien once wrote, "If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world." We all need to stand up to fascism sweeping through our country. We will not be silent, and we will continue to show up and advocate for the equal and equitable treatment of all LGBTQ+ people in our community. Thank you to the City Council of Healdsburg for this kind honor and having our family receive this proclamation of June Pride Month in 2025. Thank you. That was wild.
Are you speaking? Did you want to say? Okay, so why don't we have you come up for, so everybody who's here who wants to be in the picture with the city council, we can do that now?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So now we have another proclamation declaring June 2025 as Elder Abuse Awareness Month. Councilmember Edwards.
A proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg recognizes June 2025 as Elder Abuse Awareness Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas Healdsburg's older adults are valued members of our society, and abuse of older adults is a tragedy inflicted on vulnerable seniors, an ever-increasing problem in today's society that crosses all socioeconomic boundaries. and elders and dependent adults have the right to be protected under the law from all types of abuse, including financial, physical, psychological, sexual, spiritual, or neglect. In combating the abuse of older persons, we will improve the quality of life for Healdsburg's older adult population, enable them to continue to serve as leading mentors, volunteers, and important activity members in this community. And whereas elder abuse should not be ignored nor endured, and the issue of elder abuse prevention requires continual community awareness and education. The City of Healdsburg provides support services and education to our older adult population through the Healdsburg Senior Center and its programs and services. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council, the City of Healdsburg, hereby recognizes June 2025 as Elder Abuse Awareness Month and encourages all residents to recognize and celebrate the accomplishment of Healdsburg's older adults.
Thank you. And we have Krista Barnett Nelson, Executive Director of Senior Advocacy Services, and Adult Protective Services Supervisor Rachel Lynch to receive the proclamation.
Rochelle, yes.
Sorry.
Okay. So as stated, my name is Krista Barnett Nelson. I'm the Long-Term Care Ombudsman for Sonoma County with Senior Advocacy Services.
I'm Rochelle Lynch. I'm one of 4 of the Adult Protective Services supervisors for investigative social workers who go out and investigate allegations of abuse or neglect.
So we both want to thank you for this proclamation recognizing June as Elder Abuse Awareness Month, as you did last year. Elder abuse is a silent crisis affecting millions of older adults across the country, and it's happening right here in our communities. It's not just physical abuse. It includes emotional harm, neglect, and increasingly financial exploitation. It's devastating. One of the most heartbreaking truths is that most of these cases, the abuser isn't a stranger. It's someone the elder knows and trusts, a caregiver, a family member, and even a neighbor. That's why visibility and awareness is so critical. And by making this proclamation, the City of Healdsburg sends a powerful message. Your community sees, values, and protects its older adults. As a long-term care ombudsman, we work closely with Adult Protective Services to investigate and respond to reports of abuse in long-term care facilities. Together, we advocate, we intervene, and we support older adults in regaining their safety, dignity, and peace of mind. This collaboration is essential, but prevention starts with awareness, and awareness that you, as city leaders, are helping to create. Thank you for recognizing the importance of World Elder Abuse Day. Your voice matters, and you're ensuring that every adult in Healdsburg lives with the respect and protection they deserve.
And to add to that, so Adult Protective Services for Sonoma County, we actually respond to allegations of abuse or neglect for adults aged 18 to 59 that have mental or physical limitations that restrict the ability to carry out normal activities and protect their rights and do not live in a licensed facility. So that's why we work in tandem. And then, of course, elder, so 60 and older are now considered elder in our framework. I wanted to share a couple of statistics with you. According to this census of 2023 5-year estimates, 60-plus-year-olds in Sonoma County are about 136,000 individuals, which represents 28% of the county. It's projected to reach 35% of our adult population by 2030, and that's in comparison to 25% of California's 60-plus population. Another thing to remember and just to be mindful and aware of is the way that some parts of our county are just designed, or they're more isolated. 12% are considered geographically isolated that are 60 and older. So another thing to consider. Seniors are the fastest growing population in our county. Just want to mention the great collaboration that Adult Protective Services in Sonoma County also has with the Healdsburg Police Department's social services team.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Can you stick around for a minute to get the picture with the council? Thank you. So next we have a proclamation declaring June 2025 as Gun Violence Awareness Month. Vice Mayor Herod.
Thank you. Proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring June 2025 as National Gun Violence Awareness Month in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas gun violence touches every segment of our society and impacts people of all ages, and whereas gun violence raises the likelihood of fatality by those who intend to injure others and among those who attempt suicide, and whereas gun violence places children and young people at increased risk of physical harm and injury, and whereas we acknowledge the vital role of community organizations in supporting families experiencing the devastating effects of gun violence, whereas these organizations play a vital role in supporting grieving parents and spouses as they cope with their loss, ensuring the continued well-being of surviving family members, whereas the City of Healdsburg supports continued statewide efforts to strengthen gun safety laws and educate the community on safe gun storage, whereas the City of Healdsburg is committed to raising awareness of gun violence and providing educational resources to reduce the risks of injuries or loss of life due to gun violence in our community. And whereas Gun Violence Awareness Month honors the many lives that have been cut short by gun violence in our country and supports efforts to reduce gun-related crimes in the United States. And whereas it is appropriate to set aside time to honor those Americans whose lives are cut short each year by gun violence and the countless survivors whose lives are forever altered. Now therefore be it proclaimed, the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby declares June 2025 as Gun Violence Awareness Month in the City of Healdsburg.
Thank you for that. And we have Police Chief Matt Jenkins to receive this proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm honored to accept this proclamation recognizing June as Gun Violence Awareness Month. This recognition is an opportunity to promote safety, responsibility, and prevention. The police department is proud to partner with Project Safe Kids to provide free gun locks to Healdsburg residents. And to date, over 1,200 gun locks have been provided through this partnership. Safe storage is one of the simplest and most effective ways to protect our children and prevent tragic accidents. And this council has taken meaningful action through the adoption of a safe storage ordinance, ensuring that firearms are secured and inaccessible to those who should not have access. I also want to take this opportunity to remind our community that the Healdsburg Police Department accepts unwanted firearms, no questions asked. So if you have a gun in your home that you no longer need or want, turning it in is a proactive way to prevent harm. All you have to do is come in, please bring it in a secured container, locked, or give us a call and we're happy to help facilitate that turn in. So thank you.
Thank you. You want to get a picture with the council? You've been waiting for that, right? Let's do that.
Chief, you want to stay?
Hey, great. Thanks, everybody. So now we'll move on to city manager reports. City Manager Kay?
Thank you, Mayor. A few updates I wanted to share. First off, I think I mentioned last update that we were moving into the depths of our busy event season, and that's obviously become our reality. I wanted to speak to one aspect of one of our events a couple of weeks ago, and a little bit about the city's response, which was parade night, and the parade was fantastic. And I know all of us city officials were honored and had a blast participating. It seemed like it was great for the community. Obviously, leading up to that, we had some pretty horrendous traffic challenges in town. I think the council's familiar, and most of us are at this point. That was set off really not at all by the parade, but by a tragic fatality in an accident on 101 a few hours beforehand. Obviously, I'll acknowledge first that the loss of life was far more significant than the traffic inconveniences that we all experienced in the hours that followed. With that said, we did receive a number of questions about the city's response and how we might deal with traffic issues like that, what that might mean for other public safety challenges such as evacuation. So I did just want to share that. First off, I think we acknowledge that we had a little bit of a perfect storm in terms of traffic impacts that evening. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of cars diverted off of 101 to run through the city. That does happen every handful of months, it seems like, in town when something goes awry on 101. And we have made some changes to how we respond to that and how we route people through town depending on which exits are out and what that detour requires. That varies a little bit. What made that night obviously much more challenging is we also had hundreds, maybe thousands of people making their way to the center of town for a parade, many in non-traditional vehicles that we don't normally see on our small street system, and with lots and lots of street closures right in the middle of town, which made it harder and harder to move through. We definitely, what I hope is obvious, but I want to assure the council and the community is we devoted all of the resources we could that day in terms of communicating with each other and our team and law enforcement that was here in town to help us with crowd management for the parade, to try to deploy resources as best as we could to try to keep things running as smoothly as possible, and most importantly, just keep people as safe as possible. And we've taken time in the week and a half or so since that to do some debriefing and try to think about how messaging or traffic control might work a little bit differently. So it's certainly something we take seriously. With all of that said, I think our conclusion is what we had is simply more cars than our street grid could handle. And I know some of the questions I got were, why didn't we have crowd control in more and different places? And one answer to that is obviously we have limited resources, especially on a major special event night. But probably more significantly, in a lot of places, more crowd control probably just wouldn't have helped. We just had much more volume than our streets were able to handle, and had to kind of let that work its way out over a period of several hours. So I'm grateful for all those who did lean in and try to manage the situation as best as possible. Certainly, we appreciate the patience and flexibility of all the people who suffered in some of that traffic. But I really did just want to acknowledge it and let you all know that we have devoted resources, and we always do. Anytime something challenging goes on, we invest time in trying to think about, well, what might we do a little bit different the next time to make it go more smoothly. So we've definitely done that. And again, with that said, I do think in this case, there probably wasn't anything to be done to really mitigate the traffic. It's just a question of, again, how do we keep people safe and get people information they need to navigate it? So I just wanted to really acknowledge that and let you all know that it's something we've been thinking about and investing some time in. A couple of other quick updates on different topics. We have an open senior housing survey. This is a commitment in our housing element, and something we've been focusing on this year is better understanding the housing needs of our senior community. So there is an ongoing survey at the senior center that's available, and I just want to remind everybody and encourage people who patronize the senior center or might be inclined to do so, that if they are there, please take a few minutes. It's available at the facility, and I know the staff there would be happy to help people navigate that process. Different update is we took in this council took an action a handful of meetings ago to facilitate and support the closing of financing for the Saggio Hills Affordable Housing Project. We will formally have a celebration of the groundbreaking of that later this month, but I think they're out there. If they're not, they're going to be out there very, very soon. So unofficially, but most importantly, dirt will start moving around in that part of town, and construction is going to be off and running. We'll try to get information out. I know information's already gone to the immediate neighbors about some of those impacts, and we've gotten pretty good at navigating the process of trying to mitigate impacts from construction on neighbors, but I don't want to lose in all of that the good news, which is this is a project that you've all been working on for years, and it is truly off and running. So we'll look forward to seeing the buildings rise out of the dirt in the fairly near future. And I think just one other update, I'm starting to have now props with my city manager reports. I have here a beautiful, shiny, new countertop compost container. You might recall we had grant funding a couple of years ago to make those available to the public, and we do once again. I know they went fast a few years ago, so perhaps lots of people already have them. I know I do and use it daily. I can certainly say from my own experience, there's more composting happening in my house because of this container and the convenience. But we do have them available, again, one per Healdsburg household. If people want to come into City Hall, good until they're gone. So I would encourage people, if anybody's watching and interested, to come on down to City Hall. This is just one of the many, many things we do to try to help and facilitate responsible waste management. So, and it's been a popular giveaway. I think that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions? Councilmember Haley.
I think a couple of things. First, on the traffic issue, I think we heard a lot of frustration, but I think it's also a good reminder of why there's a freeway that bypasses Healdsburg and the amount of traffic that travels right past us instead of through town, like St. Helena. That's a little bit more of a challenge. And so I think that needs to be acknowledged when you think about that. That really gives you a good example of how much traffic is really just driving past town that then got diverted off. And then you didn't mention the fair, which I was able to attend for quite a bit. And there was, hopefully when the post kind of the meeting, there were a couple of things that I observed related to like recology and when the dumpsters are going to be dropped off, the porta potties and wash stations and things like that. But one of the comments that I heard was really related to the public bathrooms. So the ones up by the park were closed and by the prune packers were closed. And so I was wondering if you had any feedback for the public as to why those were closed. Because what I was hearing is those are public restrooms, they should be open.
Sure, we've heard the same thing. I know it's something that our team, and I'm sure in concert with the fair organizers, will be thinking about for future years. Two sets of restrooms, as you know. One is the restrooms at Georgie Park. This actually came up in a council discussion last year, though I don't imagine everybody watches our council meetings every Monday night. That there are challenges with the lift station and with capacity at those bathrooms where a crowd of that nature really overwhelms them very quickly. So for, I'm not quite sure how long, but at least a couple of years, I know the city has closed those and relied on porta potties because when there's a large event, they can get pretty gross pretty fast, and it can be hard to manage that. So that's one thing that I don't have an answer right now as to what it would take to remedy that, but it's something I'm interested in, and I imagine others are as well. And then I understand there's also at Rec Park over by the ball field and the grandstand additional restrooms. My understanding, and I'll ask our community services team to jump in if I get anything wrong. My understanding is that there was a decision made this year that rather than trying to manage and keep those operational in the face of the same very large crowds, to rely on the porta potties. I think that's something we can revisit. I've heard the same thing, that there was some frustration in how that worked this year. So I don't think I have enough information to make a commitment on what the right answer would be, but I think we understand the frustration and we'll potentially revisit that or look at some different operational options.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. I think, just my observation, obviously Thursday night is a completely different event than Friday during showmanship or Saturday during the auction, and it's just the mass of people is a little bit different. But I think that's something that as we transition from this, after the parade party, everybody's there, kind of event that's just packed, to then switching more over to the FFA 4-H fair and auction side, that, maybe that's some of the discussion about how that's managed with the porta potty cleanup, the bathrooms, the water stations, those kind of things. So it's just minor irritants that I think, the feedback I hear is, oh, for the tourist events, you roll out the high price, this and that. It's like, well, but they're paying for that. But I think, when we look at what we have and what we can do, I think there's some things that can be done. The other thing that I think needs to be considered is this year, during the auction around 6 o'clock, we got word that the Healdsburg High baseball team won their playoff game, which means they would have had their home game there on Wednesday, but the field wasn't going to be ready, or the tents or whatever. And again, you never know, but I think those are the things when we have the after action report kind of meeting with the fair to kind of think about some of those things as if that happens in the middle of everything going on, who's the contact person? Could we be ready for a game on Wednesday? Having the players get the field ready, because it would have been great to celebrate the home team at home. Instead, they had to play that game on the road where they ended up losing. But just those kind of things I wanted to just highlight. So that's all I had.
Anyone else? Councilmember Kelly?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for the report. And I know, those issues regarding the traffic and rerouting through town, definitely heard a lot of those comments about just concerns, for a mass evacuation event or others, that it doesn't create a lot of confidence in the community that the city will be able to respond in a timely way to help move traffic in and around town. So I appreciate that we're looking at that. And I know staff has been talking about it as well. And I just want to reiterate the comments of Councilmember Hagley. I think, people in the community are frustrated that it seems that when we have events at some, public spaces, that we are not, allowing access to city facilities. And I think that obviously that's not the case. And when there's a cost associated with using those facilities, right, we typically ask the event producers to bear the cost of that. Because that's the reason why the event is happening. So I think figuring out how do we ensure that if there is an event happening at any city facility, that we have a standard procedure for ensuring that the restroom facilities are open. I mean, there's so many people eating and drinking at the event, and animals and all the things that come along with animals. You really want people to be able to wash their hands with water and soap, and to not be able to do that, and to have, young people there, and the porta potties that are really, not something that most people would feel comfortable using after a number of days if they haven't been cleaned. I think we just owe it to our community to have better proactive steps on knowing that hundreds of people are going to be, celebrating at this venue, and that we can be more proactive about ensuring that there's sanitary conditions for everybody to enjoy it safely and have places to wash their hands. It's pretty basic, but I think we just need to get out in front of it a little bit more. And frankly, if folks don't want to, pay a permit fee to use certain facilities, or we don't have a comfort level with staffing, then I think we need to have like a proactive conversation around it, just because it ends up, there just is blowback on the city that looks like we don't care about 4-H and FFA in our community, which is not the case. None of us, knew that that was going to be the case. And so we want to ensure that everyone has access to, sanitary conditions at events in our city, and being able to use restroom facilities so they can stay and enjoy it. So thank you.
Director Theming?
May I address the two items that came up? One, the high school actually did reach out to the city to inquire about playing the baseball game there. It really wasn't feasible because of the condition of the field, and they're still removing equipment from the fair. Timing just wouldn't work out. In fact, the Prune Packers don't even play till this Friday because it takes us about 2 weeks to refurbish the field from the fair. And I guess the decision to not have the restrooms open at Recreation Park was not the city's decision. So there's issues with Georgie Park restrooms, it's volume of material, but the other ones was not the city's decision. And I think we can work with the Fair Board to address that in the future. But I'm just curious, is there another event that came up at, or are we focused on the fair? Okay, that helps. Thanks.
And just real quick, well, you're here. So on the baseball field, what level, because when I went by on Wednesday, it looked like, the stuff was gone. I thought like, oh, the tents are going to be there, this and that. And maybe the field's not perfect. I could tell there was like where the tarps were down, the grass was not in good condition, but it seems like baseball would not be a high impact use on the field for one high school baseball game versus like, say, a football game.
Yeah.
Am I like uninformed observer? I want to make sure that like, what am I missing?
Sure. It's actually not the impact of the baseball playing on the field. It's the condition of the field. So when they go in, they put down their mats, and the fair does a great job at protecting the natural turf. But there's areas that are sometimes rutted because there's vehicles that are out there where they put the tents down. The level of the field isn't the same. So you run the risk of having, for example, a ground ball popping up and hitting someone. It is a challenge every year, but our team works really hard to turn it around as quickly as they can. But the fairs, you're talking thousands of people on the turf over the course of 4 days.
Factors and
Irrigation shut off for 2 weeks. There's all these factors that go into it. So, but our Parks and Open Space Superintendent, Mr. Lycia, and the high school baseball coach had a conversation when they won, and the coach seemed to understand the challenges of playing there right after the fair. So.
Okay, thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any questions? Vice Mayor?
Just a quick comment about the traffic, where the traffic was moving. I did notice that the flow of information was good, and I just wanted to thank city manager and his team for answering my questions quickly, because like a lot of people, I got a lot of calls and emails from folks about it who wanted answers about what happened and what could be done, and had concerns. I was able to share some of those concerns with Jeff, and I felt really satisfied about that aspect of it. Just the fact that we would take this as a learning opportunity when in reality was a very extraordinary event. We're still wanting to learn and get better. I think that was something that reflects well on the city. And, even though I know it was really exasperating for a lot of people, I was pleased that we could, glean some new information from it. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what was really unique about this particular fair time was that both on-ramps were closed. So there's only one flow because we have that river that goes through us, so there is no way to go around. And so most of the times we only have one on-ramp closed. So that was a very unique situation on that one. And as far as the fair, I hope if they're listening, part of event planning you can do is you can rent hand washing stations. So I hope that they would look into having those, because you're right, sanitation is a very important issue. And they might look into adding to those next year, hand washing stations.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move on to public comments on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest. General interest, not on the agenda, but related to City Council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the City Council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Welcome.
Thank you. Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. My name is Brad Peterson. I'm the president of the Russian River Property Owners Association. And I want to give you a little bit of an update on our efforts to create a water district in Alexander Valley. And I know that City of Healdsburg is not in Alexander Valley, but we do share some borders, and this water district would be right next to. And as you all know, we're going to face some very serious challenges with water supply in the coming years due to changes in the Potter Valley project and water supply coming out of Lake Mendocino. So I believe that I was speaking with Councilmember Hagley earlier, and I think it's been a few years since any of my colleagues have been in to give an update. So we have We are moving forward with forming the water district. We are working through the Sonoma County LAFCO to do that, the Local Agency Formation Commission. A very daunting process. We are currently, the petition is written with all the descriptions on what the water district, what functions the water district will have, how it will be set up, how the board will be set up. There is a map of the area, interactive map that Alexander Valley members property owners can take a look at that and find out whether they're in or out of that district. All that's available at avwater.org. We're currently collecting signatures. Working through that process, we need to get 51% we need to get the owners of 51% of the acreage in the water district to sign the petition saying that they are in support of it. Then petition will then go to LAFCO, which will trigger a hearing and additional processes, eventually leading to a vote. But that's currently where we are, is about halfway through our signature collection. We've got about 50% of the acreage that we need, and we're very confident that we'll get the other 50% by our deadline in August. So this water district, I just want to say that the purpose in forming the water district is to give landowners a voice in the decisions that are going to be made. We look forward to working collaboratively with municipalities, Healdsburg, Cloverdale, Cal-Am Water, who supplies water to Geyserville. We've spoken with Cal Trout. We've spoken with Russian Riverkeeper, talked to numerous elected officials of all different levels that represent these areas. So we're trying to be very open about this, very straightforward, and above board. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, like I said, avwater.org has all the information there. Any
Great.
questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else wish to speak? Seeing no one, I'll bring this back. And
Mayor Mitchell, for the consent calendar, I believe I need to recuse myself on item H, 6H.
the Sonic agreement?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Anybody else need any recusals? So could we get a motion?
I move to adopt the consent calendar, items 6, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I, J, K, L, M, and N. That was all of the letters except for, I skipped H.
Thank you.
Move to
Second?
And I'd like to second it, but can I make just a quick comment on one of the items?
Of course.
So on 6F, that's the update of the report from Mill District, from Eden Housing, North Village, where we have all income restricted units. I would like to request that going forward, we get additional data on income restricted units compliance with our local preference language on new and re-tenanted. Just, I understand we can't require it, but it would be nice to have like a data that shows the tenants that are in the number of units, like which category they fall into. Are they the, live and work in Healdsburg, live or work in unincorporated, used to live in Healdsburg and moved back? And I think it's important that that is reported on, because each of these income restricted agreements, or the agreements we have with the income restricted units, I think it's important that we highlight that we're doing what we can to, get people that live and work in Healdsburg and kind of adhere to our local preference resolution. It's just a comment.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Edwards,
Yes.
Councilmember Hagley,
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod,
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes.
And I didn't state the reason for my recusal on H, so just out of an abundance of caution, because of a potential FPPC issue from the owners of the company, I want to just proactively recuse on this vote because I have not had a response back from the FPBC as to whether or not I can vote on it based on past donations to campaigns from people who own or formerly owned the company or the CEO.
Great, thank you for that. Could we have a motion to pass?
Make a motion that we adopt the consent calendar Measure H.
Second.
A roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Higley,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod,
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. Moving on. So public hearings, we did not have any public hearings. And old business, adopt fiscal year 25-26 city council goals. Assistant City Manager April Mitz.
Great, thank you, Mayor and council members, and I'll wait for the presentation to come up. Okay, here we go. So I'll go with the next slide. So the recommended action tonight is to, by motion, to approve the city council goals for fiscal year 25-26. Next slide. So a little bit of background on the goals and why we're here doing this is city council goals are adopted annually and it applies to fiscal years. So the goals in front of you tonight will start fiscal year 26, which starts July 1st. The City Council Goal Setting Workshop. So this is not the first time that we have seen these goals and discussed these goals. So back on April 18th, the City Council and the public had the opportunity to come and review these goals. It was held at Healdsburg Golf Club at Taman Park Clubhouse. It was open to the public and it was facilitated by MRG. So why do we set goals? There's a couple big reasons why we set goals. The first is to determine and drive direction. So it's the direction that the city council is then giving to staff based on their policies and their strategic priorities. That sets the goal, the strategic direction for staff. It also helps us align and commit our resources. That's both staffing and fiscal resources. So you'll see some of this come up in budget cycles. It also gives us the chance to monitor and communicate the progress to the council as well as to the public. And also it helps us celebrate those accomplishments, celebrate things that are big things, small things, heavy lifts, but great things that are happening in this community. So the strategic direction, so how we got to where we are today is there was a 5-year strategic plan that was done for 2020 to 2025. There are 7 strategic goals. So you'll see those a little bit more in detail later. And then from those 7 strategic goals in fiscal year 24-25, which we're in right now, there were 36 individual projects that were tied to those strategic goals. And then for the city council goals for 25-26, so this is what we discussed on April 18th, there's now 44 individual projects that coincide with those 7 strategic goals. It's important to note too, actually go to the next slide and we talk about it here. So across the bottom, you'll see this does not include day-to-day operations and most what we consider back office projects. One of the analogies that was brought forward to see at the goal setting, as well as I've seen it before in other settings, where you picture an iceberg, where you have the tip of an iceberg, and then you see how much of the iceberg is below the water that you don't see. The day-to-day operations is everything below the water that most people don't see. So the strategic goals, and then the work plan that goes along with it is tip of the iceberg. So that's in addition to everything that's already going on with the city and with staff. And so how we got to where we are today with our goals is we had our updated fiscal year 25 goals. What we did as staff, we looked at the goals, we worked with the facilitators, and we removed goals that were completed or near completed. The next step is that we added projects that had prior council direction. So throughout the year, sometimes projects come up, so we wanted to make sure that those were captured in the new goals. Then we also added emerging opportunities that are evolving in our community or the organizational needs that we have that are evolving. So we added those in there. So now you see that some got taken away and more are added. So that's how we got up to 44. And then we also added goals that were new requirements or regulations by outside organizations. And then finally, our consulting group, MRG, did meet with the council members individually. Those ideas were all brought to the goal setting workshop. And then we did a straw vote. Council did a straw vote to get us to the 44 that we have before us tonight. I will not read this in detail. I apologize for the very, very fine print, but you'll see across the top are the 7 categories, and then you'll see the particular goals within those categories. And the next few slides will actually break those out on a very high level individually. So the first category is economic diversity and sustainable growth. So the goals that were started to put in motion that day that are before you tonight is the housing element land use code updates, the station area specific plan. So again, that's the plan for the south end of town. Objective design standards to update the 2025 California Building Code update and bring it to you for adoption. Update the Parklet program for 2026 and beyond, and then also host a meeting on economic trends for this area. The next council strategic goal is environmental stewardship. And you'll see some of these, they're marked with an asterisk. Anything that's marked with an asterisk directly relates to the climate mobilization strategy. So that is something that we are going through everything in that strategy. And so those are goals that specifically address that strategy. So the first is to update the tree ordinances, and that's both protection of trees and also the tree list. Renewable energy procurement plan, and you'll hear a little bit more about that tonight, as well as adding a couple water bottle filling stations in Healdsburg. Next strategic goal is affordable housing. So these are things that we'll be working on is the inclusionary housing ordinance update to support permitting process for Saggio, I'm still getting to learn how to pronounce these, Hills and also 155 Dry Creek. Facilitate the exploration of a community housing land trust, complete renovations of Victory Studios and apartments, and then prioritize options to eliminate or reduce barriers to encourage housing developments. And Niels, I do want to point out in the staff report, you can actually see the corresponding report that came from MRG, and it does talk about what are the funding requirements, if we have any, if we don't have any, and also mentions where we have grants or where we don't have funding for some of these items. So the next is infrastructure and facilities. This has a continued, I think we have 3 different pages on these particular projects. So the first page deals specifically with parks, landscaping, streets, bikes, and pedestrian. So it's the Healdsburg Avenue Complete Street Project and debts to complete the design. And remember, these are all meant to be completed as much as possible in a 1-year timeframe. The Grove Street Neighborhood Plan to actually begin construction. The Ward Street Neighborhood Plan to do infrastructure planning. The Active Transportation Plan implementation. Complete March Avenue pavement rehab and enhance the crossing at Lupine. And also explore revenue for infrastructure and road repairs. We have a lot of infrastructure and road things to do, but we don't have a dedicated funding source. So that's something that we're going to be looking at. Where can we get funding to potentially do these projects as well as projects further down the pipeline? And again, you'll notice anything in the asterisk is directly related to the climate mobilization strategy. So here's your infrastructure for your water side. So it's the Dry Creek well field, the construction drawings, and then also Sonoma Water purchase agreement for additional water. I do want to point out, and it was noted in the staff report, the original goal list that came to council on the 18th that council by straw vote agreed on did address the aquifer storage and recovery, so the ASR wells. At the meeting on May 5th, council did remove that goal because we did not have funding for that project, but staff is continually looking at funding, and if we do find resources for it, we'll definitely bring it back to council for consideration. So I wanted to make that notation in here that was discussed, and then we pulled it off from the meeting after the 18th. And then also for infrastructure, evaluate and implement flood monitoring technology. The next strategic goal is effective governance. And so what we want to do is enhance the city's communication and outreach to build public trust. We talked a lot about that during that meeting. Update the council's governance protocols, constituent request system, looking to see what that would look like and how we can actually facilitate that. And then also council chamber AV infrastructure improvements and upgrades. And we're calling this phase 1 because we know that that could get into a very, very expensive project and we don't have dedicated funding right now. So it's something that we're going to be looking at least implementing what we can. Public health and safety. Again, I think we have 3 slides on this. So in particular for the fire department is doing the fire department standards of coverage study. fit and finish the fire substation on the north end of town, roll out the wildfire mitigation program, and these are the parcel-to-parcel inspections, development of a community chipper program and funding exploration for that program, as well as city open space wildfire management plan. For police, continuing to talk about police recruitment and retention initiative, strengthen emergency preparedness and disaster response. And then for both fire and police, doing a facilities assessment and plans. So this looks at the facilities needs assessment. What do we actually need to do for these different facilities to get them up to where we need them to be? And then also look at space planning for both areas. Community services. So the policies and programs is to implement arts and culture master plan, to research branding and identity, future funding for the program, and also the percentage for the arts, because as we know, that's a brand new commission we have. So we're still learning along the way, and we want to get a master plan in there. Revise the City Healdsburg Unified School District Joint Use Agreement. Launch the Foley Family Community Pavilion operational plan. It's always so fun to see everything new coming aboard right across the street. Compassionate Communities End of Life Program, and then also support the Latino community and immigration issues. Next slide. So we're continuing in community services. So for community facilities is develop and implement a plan and funding strategy for the Abel de Luna Community Center Multicultural Center vision. And then for park and open space, the first two for the Laura Fish Summersall Park and then also Badger Park redevelopment. And we're looking at completing design and beginning phase 1 of construction for both of those projects. And then prioritize the creation of an all-inclusive magical bridge playground for at least one of our facilities. So with that, the recommended action again tonight is by motion, approve the city council goals for fiscal year 25-26. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. We have several department heads as well as City Manager Kay. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Great report. Does the council have questions? Councilmember Kelly, do you want to start?
Sure. I had a question about affordable housing. I'll just do them by subject area because I think that's probably easier to follow. So under the affordable housing goal, one of the things that I think we had previously discussed, and I'm asking my colleagues if you recall the same, when we had a presentation from Director Sotomayor a couple months ago, it all blurs together, sometime earlier this year, about city-owned sites and potential housing options. I think one of the things we talked about was the fact that we are really looking strong to meet our arena cycle in this current 8-year cycle, but that we reflect on the fact that it has taken many years to get city-owned sites like the Dry Creek, 155 Dry Creek Road, or other city-owned sites like in the pipeline towards getting housing built so we can meet the cycle, and then looking at the next RHNA cycle, how are we going to meet what may end up being what we don't know, but likely even more difficult to meet the number of units required that the state's mandating. And so one of the things that we had talked about in a council meeting was continuing to identify city-owned sites to develop affordable housing in the future. And we had, in years past, talked about the community center as a potential site for housing, somewhere on that giant parcel. And also in the most recent council meeting, we talked about potentially looking at the West Plaza parking lot for housing located above increase parking. So increase, our parking capacity remaining there, but also having potential housing. And I'm curious if that is the recollection of my colleagues, if we wanted to talk about affordable housing on city-owned sites and identifying, kind of furthering the conversation around city-owned sites, not to take away from other things that are already happening on those sites, but potentially having housing as a complementary option, knowing that it will take maybe a decade to actually get there. If that's a conversation we want to have as like a workshop or something else in the coming year as part of our affordable housing goals. So that was one question I had, if that was something that anyone else recalls being the outcome of that conversation with Director Sotomayor when that item came before us. And then the other question I had was on the infrastructure and facilities. It's a question for Director Zimmer. On infrastructure and facilities, what was the status of the crosswalk project on Powell Avenue that connects kind of Lupin to Johnson, if that was something that was still moving forward, and where that sits within the infrastructure goals, since I didn't see it on the list.
That is an active project. It is currently in design.
Does it seem like that's something that we need to include in our goals of completing? So it's one more thing you get to, oh, consider it done. Okay, great. Well, for anyone who didn't hear it out there, let's put it on the list and then check it off immediately. Consider it done, he says. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Hagan?
Yeah, I think we had a real robust discussion. There's one thing that I had forgotten to mention during goals that I wanted to bring up, and then another one that we kind of talked about here earlier about the lift station. I would like to have, a little bit more clarity on exactly what's going on. So just an agenda item on, getting a report on getting the bathrooms, what's needed on that. The at Rec Park, where there was potentially an issue with the lift station and, Yeah, you're right. Georgian Park. Sorry. Right over the fence. So that one, and then the other one that I meant to bring up during the council goal setting, and I totally forgot until some other conversations started happening, was I had been approached by a number of people about having sand volleyball courts in Healdsburg. And so had the conversation, and there's quite the team that's forming at, Healdsburg High. A lot of the high schools have sand volleyball teams that are getting pretty popular. There's a number of sites. Had calls with Director Themig, another local resident / coach on it. And what I would like to add, and I didn't do the, hey, everybody come pack the council chambers. But what I would like to add is to direct staff to explore options, including possible locations and estimated costs for the construction of a competition level sand volleyball courts. So basically 4 courts in one location, somewhere in Healdsburg. So the discussion that we had, there might be an opportunity to work with the school district. There might be, different locations that, it's not a huge lift in terms of engineering, but what I would like to do in the feedback that I had was there is an interest in this. This hits our target of trying to find more things for teens in our community. As we, really lean into the all ages community thing. And so that's my ask, is I would like to add that under community services for the parks and open space. Just that request staff during this next year to explore what the cost is, potential locations, and then we can decide what to do. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Since we have 2 park projects that are moving into the design phase, is that kind of, I assume that the volleyball courts, either they're going to be at a school site potentially or at a park. Would it be possible to just have that item be a part of the park planning process for the residents to participate with the parks design team and the people we've already hired to see if it's feasible to have sand volleyball in the park planning process that's kind of already a vehicle that's moving?
So I think part of it is there is, the desire to have it, sooner than something that's part of the $30 million bond project. That's like the big thing. And our discussions that we had, there's potentially a couple sites that it could be, like I said, it's not a big engineering lift, potential sites where they could go in rather quickly. So this is something that could be done. So that's kind of what I wanted to agendize and get on here to have staff just come back with here's some potential locations, here's the potential cost. What do you think? And I think that's important. There are a lot of people that do want this and are excited about this.
Vice Mayor?
It kind of reminds me of the need and want for pickleball courts, in that we do have these 2 big park projects coming along, and obviously we wish they were quicker, but there's a consideration that we shouldn't invest in
in other places too heavily if we have something that's really going to be specifically designed for that particular sport with these other two parks. And so I kind of am echoing what Councilmember Kelly said, that, and I'm not against getting information. I mean, there's nothing wrong with learning if there's a quick and easy, so to speak, possibility to do this somewhere if there's really is a need. But those ideas are going to compete with what we could maybe do better in these two park locations where, if I remember correctly, and maybe Director Thime can chime in here a little bit, that there were some placeholder sort of sport court areas in those designs. And, one could shift from something to another, from basketball to volleyball or whatever, if that's what we thought the need was.
Yeah, and my thought was this is something that, again, would not be a heavy lift if council wanted to, we come back to numbers and everything looks fine. It's something that could be done fairly quickly to address a desire and need in the community that I think really, like I said, hits that teen area, but also all ages. There are a number of different sites that potentially could work. And again, some may even be on school property. So I want to just have that discussion and have staff come back to us. And at that time, if we decide, okay, well, let's put it in with the big plan or whatever, that's fine. But right now, what I would like to see is where are the potential locations? How much is it? Are we talking 75 grand or are we talking $1 million? I mean, we have, something here that was like $7 million and we had full, so it's, what level is it? And at this stage, there's some examples of them that have been done. They're very popular up in Sebastopol. There's a couple in Santa Rosa. So it's really taking hold. So that's my ask, is just, I would like staff to be able to come back to us with something that we can say yes or no to.
I guess I haven't heard the need yet. I'm trusting you that there is a lot of energy for this. And if that's so, and no reason to not trust you on that. But with pickleball, it was very much, a large community group that brought it to us again and again, and we haven't had that with this. So that's my only hesitation. It's like, is there really the energy to, behind this idea to go forward with it? But assuming there was, then I would support this idea.
Councilmember Edwards, do you have some questions, comments?
I'm just a little more cautious, bringing up pickleball. I wonder, there was a big outcry for pickleball and it was the big thing of the day. And if that's still popular, but I think experience says it's not going to be cheap. But it would be nice to hear that. I know that we're kind of fiscally cautious right now in this kind of uncertainty time. And I don't want I'd hate to give the illusion that, yes, we are looking for this. Look, the council looked at this, they have a price and they're not doing anything for the community. So I am concerned that, we do have those fiscal constraints, but, if staff time is available, we've already set these goals out to manage staff time. So.
Yeah, and one did get removed off of there. But again, if we have a potential location, the cost, then there's fundraising opportunities. And Councilmember Harrod, Vice Mayor Harrod, I'll tell you, as a dad that has spent the last 6 months going to volleyball tournaments, just because you haven't heard about it does not mean that pull and desire, it doesn't exist in town.
I'm willing to trust you.
A lot.
So if I could weigh in on this too, I feel like we're getting off topic a bit here and adding something. Now, I'm not sure what you're asking for us to agendize this.
My ask is to direct staff to explore options, including possible locations and estimated costs for the construction of a competition level sand volleyball courts in Healdsburg.
Okay.
That's it.
So that's it.
Come back with costs and
that's a lot,
location.
I think. I'm concerned about, we've got 44 projects that we haven't even now talked about yet because we're trying to add things. So I would have a hard time supporting that being part of these goals. You can ask them anything you want, but I'm just stating my opinion, if that's okay too. I have an opinion too. Just, what is it you want to ask Director Thime?
I just, an idea on the lift for the ask.
Well, we should ask our city manager as well, I think. He's managing all of these projects.
Well, I think you'll probably get the same answer, I hope, from either of us. If I understand the ask, it would be to come back with some information on cost and potential locations for beach volleyball courts. If the question's the magnitude of the work, obviously what we'd want to do is a couple of things. One, on the issue of cost is some comparative research. We've done just a tiny amount of that so far, having received the question, but some real comparative work in terms of construction costs for comparable facilities and how that might vary depending on the circumstances. I don't know where the location is, what types of materials. So there'd be, I don't think we do a deep dive on this, but there would be some research involved in trying to get enough data points and current data points that we could come back to you with a range of costs that what we're looking at, because I couldn't give you really that answer right now, obviously. And then second would be to look at, if I understand the request right, to look at locations and try to evaluate some of the pros and cons of different places where these might go in the context of, well, how does that fit into the master plan that you're all discussing? Does it change it? Does it sit on top of it? Is it wholly independent? And then some of the other pros and cons of different facilities we have, parking, for instance, neighbor impacts. Topography, I would assume, would be an issue. So is it a massive task? No, I don't think so. There's some real honest to goodness work and putting together information. We try to come back to you with thoughtful, decently researched information. So I'm hesitant to put a number on in terms of, and nobody asked, so maybe I won't try in terms of hours, but we try to come back with reasonably thoughtful researched information. So I don't know if that gives you a sense of the kind of things we would be thinking about and some of the research we would do. It's not one of the bigger, not all of these. I don't freak out necessarily because the number is 8 more goals than last year. These are not all created equal. And this wouldn't be on kind of the top end of the goals, but it would be a research task essentially. It would be, probably a couple people in our community services department putting in, some modest number of hours to come back and do research and put together a staff report and a presentation for you all. Mark, did I capture that appropriately, or is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I think it's something we could do in-house. We're talking about getting kind of equivalent costs. We already know there's a project down in Mill Valley that's out for bid. So we've got some experience, we've got some local examples. It's a matter of staff time committing to it. Very similar to what we did with pickleball. Councilmember Harrod probably remembers we did some mock-ups of potential locations, and we explored some things and brought them forward to the commission and city council. So I think it's something that we could do in-house when our consultant be preliminary information, and then you can make a decision about what to do with it at that point.
That's all I'm asking.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Edwards?
Can we do something as simple as research and duplicate? Like reach out to Santa Rosa, Sebastopol, and Mill Valley, who's already done it, and say, hey, what was the ballpark? I mean, to keep it simple, it was a phone call.
Absolutely. And that's what we did with pickleball. We went to Windsor and found out what their pickleball courts cost, and we were surprised, and we retooled and went in a different direction. So it's just a matter of finding what's out there and what are the current projects.
So my concerns remains, though. This is the first I've heard of needing volleyball courts in the city. I haven't heard from people personally. So it feels like we're sort of jumping the gun on getting quotes and bids and places we're going to do this. It seems like we should be asking first, do people want it? And is it part of the process? And nothing is simple. Nothing is easy or quick either, and cheap. So, I have a hard time going along with the idea that this would be really easy and fast. Nothing is. So this concerns me, and just adding another goal to our list that we haven't even gotten to yet. So that would be my take on it. I would not want to see it in this moment on these added to these goals personally. Do I have any other comments?
So I've just looked up the Mill Valley project. They're estimating $160,000. ChatGPT says it's $150,000 for 4 outdoor courts, not including prevailing wage labor. So it'd probably be more than $150,000 to do the 4 courts. That's estimating at $35,000 approximately per if you did 4. So, and I know that in the last capital improvement program budget for the Community Services Department, we had identified several projects that we put towards funding, one of them being repairing the deck at the skate park and putting up a shade structure, I think were the things that we ultimately didn't have enough funding for in the capital improvement program budget for community services. So I know that there's like a laundry list of items under the community services capital budget, like trying to put up lights at the basketball courts at Georgie Park, putting up netting at Rec Park for fly balls that keep almost hitting people's homes along University Street. Like the list is millions of dollars long. I can't remember, but yes, it's in the millions. And yes, there's a lot of items that we keep saying eventually we'll get to those things. So I love this idea because I think it's getting our kids out and being active, and obviously adults can use it too. I'm just concerned that like right now we're not funding and taking care of the things we already have, and we already know how many things we still have to fund and fix under community services, and that's one of our departments that has a lot of money, and we still can't, take care of the things we already have. And so I'm hesitant to give false promises to the community by even like moving forward with the idea of it, unless there was, funding that appeared that maybe would change our mind. But it feels like I feel like opening the can of worms on like a shiny new project when we're not taking care of what we already have and fulfilling the needs of all of these other capital improvement needs. It just gives me concern. But I want to say yes. I just feel like we don't have the money right now to do it. Given all the other competing needs.
So if I could just say a few things, because I've heard a number of comments here, which is a little disappointing, especially related to if I haven't heard about it, then there's not the desire out there in the community. But what I will say is my ask is for staff to explore potential locations, because the discussions we had, there may be an opportunity with the Healdsburg Unified School District. There may be opportunities at different locations. What's the cost? And, to your point, I completely agree. There's a lot of stuff that we have on our list right now, but without a location that has been identified that this would work at, and the cost, then we don't have the opportunity to even look at potential, whether it's fundraising things or, different opportunities for funding it outside of what we have here. But I think that's something that the city should lead in terms of at least coming back with a proposal. And so I would hope that there'd be 2 other council members that would support at least, just like I said, directing staff to explore the options, which they've preliminarily done, and include possible locations and estimated cost. That's it.
Do we have 2 other council members who would support that? I do not.
Wow. Okay.
I'm curious that, as Councilmember Kelly brought up, that we go forward with this, and are we saying that we can squeeze it in? And I don't want to give that false impression. Although if it's simple as identifying possible locations, it's something that is as simple as that. But we now know an estimate of the cost. We know that there's an estimate $1 million long list through Park and Rec. And maybe that might be the better place to hear this, is to have them get community feedback on that. But I just don't want to give false hope. It sounds good. It's a good idea. And then my granddaughter plays volleyball, got her into Berkeley on that part of the scholarship. So as Councilmember Kelly said, we have a long list that we did. We got a presentation from Parks and Rec we asked them to prioritize things. I think we can keep this as a wishful item, and not to put it completely away, but to understand that if something opens up, that this is an important thing that one of our council members has brought forward.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'm honest when I say I trust that there is a lot of interest that you've learned about. I need to learn about it too. I think we all need to feel that momentum, and I think at some point I'll feel more comfortable adding to a pretty hefty budget list where some projects are being waylaid that the community really wants. It's it's a queue where there's lots of different people who want different things, and we can't be. We have to decide carefully how a new project gets cut in the line, and that's kind of how I look at this. I don't necessarily want to put it on the back of the line. If there's a ton of people who really want this, then maybe we start to reevaluate how we want to pay for things. But I think it is a really cool idea, and I don't want to throw water on it, but I think it. But there is a lot on the table already, and so I'm hesitant to step in on right now. So I wouldn't oppose. I'm opposed to it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Kelly?
I think that in knowing kind of the history of how other projects have found their way, like when we reached out to the school district to have the old tennis courts turned into pickleball courts and different sports-oriented projects. I think that having the Parks and Rec Commission as like the conduit to the city for residents who have a need that's not being met seems like it would be a good avenue to at least demonstrate interest, to kind of like do what other community groups have done, to have it get kind of be on the awareness of the public facing body that works directly with the community services department around parks and recreation issues. Because I think then it can be a more like iterative process in a way that down the road could lead to a better outcome. So I don't want to say that like never are we going to have sand volleyball courts in Healdsburg. I just think knowing what's already in the deferred maintenance budget, it feels hard to say like we should move forward with anything new until we can take care of what we have.
Okay, so I think then we'll move on from that. Do we have any other questions about the goals?
My affordable housing goal or question didn't get answered.
Sorry, yeah, so could you restate your question?
Yeah, so my question was around affordable housing and identifying city-owned sites as one of the potential goals for next year, to have a conversation about advancing or giving staff direction to evaluate the feasibility of having housing at either. I mean, there's a lot of different sites, but in the presentation that we got from Sotomayor, the ones that seemed as though they would yield units in a meaningful way were either the West Plaza parking lot or the community center site. And I know that there is a active community-led initiative for a multicultural center at the community center site, so that having housing there wouldn't foreclose on the opportunity of that still continuing, but it would be a complementary effort to have co-located housing on that city-owned site in some capacity in the future. So just really the question is if that is what we want a staff goal to be, to do further evaluation of those sites, or to have a workshop where we can get a presentation about that in the coming year, if that's a goal of the council. My biggest concern is that we kind of continue to move forward towards the next RHNA cycle and we don't have future sites identified for those like kind of larger, bigger bang for your buck number of units, and we're going to have a huge RHNA target in the next cycle that we don't currently have plans in motion that's going to help us get there. So the question is that what other folks were thinking would happen in the coming year under affordable housing based on that prior council meeting that we had a presentation from Director Sotomayor? If it is, should we put it in the goals so at least it lives somewhere? If it wasn't something that we felt like was the outcome of that prior conversation about future city-owned sites or future housing development on city-owned sites, is there an interest of the council to put it on our goals as one of the affordable housing items to come forward as a discussion item for council in the next year? Was that clear?
Sort of. Thank you.
I'm curious,
Councilmember Edwards, do you want to go?
Would it be different than the capacity study? that we did on the West Plaza parking lot? Would you like to see a capacity study done for the community center area and redo the West Plaza one, or keep that West Plaza capacity plan in the fore?
It's really just do we want to build affordable housing on one of those city-owned sites and have a conversation about how do we then take the next step? That would be the conversation that would be agenda. I'm not asking that question now, but agendizing that so that we can continue to kind of move the ball forward on affordable housing on city-owned sites for the coming, mandates.
No, I think that's really good looking forward, so that we've done well because we've always had a plan where we're going next. And I think it's important that we continue that process rather than getting to our next cycle, finding out that we have more places than we have space for, and then we might end up with something that we or the public doesn't like. So I think it's a good awareness.
Vice Mayor, did you have a comment?
Yeah, there's some similarities to Councilmember Hagley's proposal, and that I'd like to get an idea of, first of all, if there's any work planned on this already, and if there isn't, what would be the lift on staff budgetarily and time-wise to insert this into their work within the coming year. And but the importance of it, I think, is evident to me. I think it's really good to get a jump on this stuff. It's going to take a long time for any good idea that is identified to be developed. So the earlier we start, the better. But I mean, is this something that we can feasibly really tackle within this cycle?
I really don't have anything to add besides we, had a lot of meetings on housing last year during Measure O, and we did the capacity study. I think there's value in that. I don't know. That's not where, really it's looking at the community center. I mean, we've talked about that in the past, but way down the road, yeah, I feel like we've had discussions on West Plaza Park. We have something there that that kind of talks about what can go there, the max there. So I don't know. I'm not really inclined to add additional discussions at this time.
So, but I guess my question is are we good to just not plan to build housing on either of those sites?
I don't
Period.
think that's what anybody is saying.
Okay, so if we do plan, great. So if we do plan to potentially build housing on either of those sites, what is the next logical step to take, assuming, right, it's going to take a decade? What's the next step, and how do we allow that to proceed under the goals of this council?
So can I just say, ask a couple questions? Like, one is, does our housing work group have any work on this subject? Because I'm not sure that they do or don't. And two is, is it this goal setting that we need to do this in? I do think it's important. I don't know that it needs to be done in the next year, because we've got 155 Dry Creek going in, we've got Sajo Hills going in, we've got North Village going in. So we do have a lot sort of on the plate of that whole process too. And, the multicultural center at the community center is sort of starting up. I can't imagine that we're going to say build there anytime soon, or even West Plaza. I don't quite know what that would look like. There was some conversation years ago about that as well, but it just feels premature.
I feel like, especially with West Plaza, when we were having those discussions, it was also to include some middle income housing and some things like that. So my concern is I don't want to just, this is affordable housing only, and this is affordable housing.
Oh, I would totally be down to have it be like a mixed income model for sure. I mean, especially if, obviously, we know how many cycles it took to apply for funding for 155 Dry Creek. And, it just takes so long with the grant cycle or the tax credit cycle. So to have revenue sources like middle income units, because then you're not just looking completely for subsidy. I think that would be a great conversation to be able to have if we put it on the agenda of things to talk about in the coming year. And I think my concern is just if we kick the can down the road another year, we don't put it on our goals this year, then it's like now it's a year from now it's 2026 and we're going to talk about it in 2027. And then, it just everything takes a long time. So,
Well, and I think from my standpoint, I would like to see a little bit more clarity come from the state in terms of, how much longer is our GMO going to be around? There's some other things that I would like to look at as we have these sites that, I agree with you. It's a discussion we need to have. I don't know about if we're getting ahead of ourselves having it now until we kind of see how the different things change and, do the RENA allocations, do they change based on the realities of what cities are able to build? So there's a little bit more information that I think so. I wouldn't put it as kicking the can down the road, but waiting for a little bit more information that will give us something new to digest and consider with a little bit more distance from, what we were working on all of last year, which is, higher density in certain locations, and both of these were kind of within those. Well, I guess the West Plaza part was excluded, but the community center was right there in that the housing. I forgot what we called it.
Overlay?
Yeah, the housing overlay district. So,
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I wondered, I would like to get a foot in the door on this issue and get it started, but I'm wondering if, because kind of the way it's framed right now, it's a really big chunk, and it sounds like, the start is a big project. And I wonder if we could whittle that down so that we can get the ball rolling without, taxing all the other things that are going on too much right at this beginning stage. So I know maybe the ask is just some kind of, just to get some of the basic potentials, what we know now, what we've looked at in the past. People said, but we have looked at things at West Plaza. We did it in the density study. Maybe there was some other thought that went into that area at some point. Let's get that out in front of us. That at least kind of gets the ball rolling. And then maybe at the next goal setting, we can take it a step further. It's going to take a while. And I'm just concerned about trying to jump into something that huge amongst all the other stuff that we already have set in our goals and elsewhere.
So can I make a suggestion? What I liked out of our meetings last year was the housing overlay. Thank you for reminding me what it was called, because I did like where we were going with that, and it's too bad that didn't pass. However, there was a lot we've talked about when we were out knocking on doors and feedback we heard after the ballot measure was on there from the community. And I think there is value in discussing a housing overlay district. I would be more interested in a discussion on, revisiting the housing overlay district, which would include that area, versus just focusing on affordable housing here and affordable housing here on these sites, where we start to have that initial community discussion, and whether it's this year or next year. I feel like that's where the value is, because I heard suggestions about, well, we could have an arts district, we have a senior district, we could have, certain areas are, lower scale, 2-story, 3-story, and then other areas could be higher density up by Dry Creek. So to me, that would be a discussion that I would be more interested in having, to gather that community feedback that from people that maybe didn't participate when we were doing the initial, all of our meetings, and maybe now they come and participate. But to me, that would be a lot more interesting to me than focusing on West Plaza Park and just the community center.
So if I could kind of poll the council here, do we want to add this to this year's goals of looking at the bigger question I think that Councilmember Kelly's asking about? Or, well, what's your preference on this, adding this goal?
I think the overlay in a well-designed conversation is much broader. We can capture a lot more, not only just city-owned property, but the whole town. And I think that that's something that quite frankly, I don't think I did a good enough job on that, the understanding and getting that information out. So maybe at some point, re-looking at that overlay. But I don't know if we got a lot of goals right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we need to focus, we're talking about this year's goals. We've got 44 projects. We've got limited budget. We've got budgets getting cut. I think we need to be really careful here on adding much. That's my major
I
concern.
think it makes a good yellow sticky that we keep it there, keep it in mind.
Can I just make
Yeah,
a
go
comment?
ahead.
So I think in my mind, the overlay is a zoning effort that our planning and building department, like Scott Diven, would oversee if we are looking at rezoning an area of town for housing. That is different. And I don't believe, I think that's a great idea, but I don't think we should move forward with it right now because of the priority development area with the station area plan that we got the grant funding for from MTC, and that is going to be a massive lift of a rezoning effort that we already got the funding to do that's going to happen. So I think in this coming year, that would be too big of an ask to also do the housing overlay. And I think we already had that conversation at council, if memory serves, that we said we're not going to move forward with I painstakingly say this because I would love to move forward with both, but I don't think we have the capacity staff capacity to do a housing overlay zoning effort and do the priority development area grant station area planning that we already have committed to moving forward with that is already in the goals. So the reason why I'm suggesting that we're just talking about those two or one city-owned site is because to me, that's more of a specific one site oriented conversation that Director Sotomayor would be kind of like in the quote unquote housing department's bailiwick as opposed to planning and zoning. Eventually, obviously, we'd have to rezone the parcels because it's not zoned for housing, et cetera. But that even just to have the conversation about, are we going to evaluate the feasibility of housing on either of these sites and to just have that conversation at some point in the next year is really the only question. And if it feels like we are already at capacity or that we already have too many other affordable housing projects going on, in my mind, it's like, I think 155 Dry Creek, North Village, and Saggio Hills, amazing, by the way, like huge pat on the back that all of these units are coming online in the next few years and we're doing groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings and it's happening. But at the same time, now that those are kind of out the door and into construction mode, now it's time to plan for like the next phase of when are we doing the next projects. Or we find ourselves kind of at the behest of developers who say, hey, we're going to come in with this shiny thing that we want, and we'll give you a handful of affordable units to help you meet your RHNA target. And then we're a little bit like behind the 8 ball on meeting our next RHNA cycle. And then we're like, okay, fine, please build that thing so we can get our affordable units. I don't like being in that position. I like having kind of more of a game plan to move forward with what we think we can build on our own sites. And we don't have that many sites per the presentation from Steven. So we really don't have that many options of where we could build the quantity of units we know we need. And sadly, we keep getting our low and very low income numbers we know are going to be high in terms of what we have to build. So, I mean, and the hope is that we're not continue to be subjected to the constraints of the GMO, but in the current era we are. So really what we can build is affordable right now. And the question is where can we build it? And right now we don't have a plan to build any more affordable units after we finish these 3 sites, which is amazing that we're doing these 3 sites, but it's like, then what? So that's the question I'm wondering if we can answer in the coming year.
Vice Mayor?
So I'm inclined to support this, but once again, I think it's important that that this first step doesn't create any prohibition in any other ongoing activities and goals. So if we can whittle it down to something that's not overwhelming time-wise, to get the ball rolling, I would support it. But if it means launching into this whole hog right now with a very detailed sort of study and public input and so on, I think probably it's too soon for that, and we've got too much on our plate. So if we can get the ball rolling with something meaningful, smart, and simplified, then I would support this.
Can we go to our city manager and get his input?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I think what I'm hearing the word feasibility a lot, and what, in my mind, what might be the appropriate manifestation of this goal would be a feasibility analysis for one or both of those sites. It's not nothing in terms of effort and probably cost, honestly. I think you'd want to have some economists on the team. But to me, that would be a meaningful way to start the ball on this under our current rezoning. I appreciate what you all said about rezoning. I too am excited to do a housing overlay, and I'll hold my position, which I appreciate you all understanding, which is I just don't think we can take that on while we also do the station area plan. So I know you all get that, and I appreciate that. But that means we're living for some meaningful period of time under our current regulations, which keep changing because the state keeps putting on different ways that our regulations mean less. With all of that said, to me, one way to get more information and decide if we want to move forward on one or both of these sites would be some sort of a feasibility analysis that looks at all of those new state laws, looks at our current zoning, and for both of those sites looks at what would be a pretty complicated obligation of having to either reconstruct parking, work around the community center, reconstruct, I'm not, it's not for me to say at this point what that project looks like, but it's a pretty huge cost burden on making those projects work. I think there's a non-zero chance what comes back is that all of those challenges don't necessarily yield a feasible project, but I guess that's the question. Is there something that could work there, and to do some sort of a study to evaluate, again, either or of these sites and say, well, just does it work? To me would be a meaningful step, because ultimately the way we make housing work on these city-owned sites is we put them out to market and solicit proposals. I suppose we could do that on these sites too, but I think we'd want to have more information and more of a solidified vision as to how we want to deal with the fact that valuable community assets are sitting there right now. So I hope that makes sense, but just to wrap up, I think the way you could move the ball a little bit forward on these projects would be a feasibility analysis that really kind of digs in and looks at those constraints and gives us some more solid information about, is there a viable project here? And if so, what does it look like?
Can I ask what kind of capacity would that take staff-wise?
I don't entirely know. I'm unfortunately without both of the relevant directors who would work on that tonight. My inclination is, though, that we would want to bring in some outside expertise to run some pro formas and run some numbers on these projects. So I think you have to, it's a multi-month. It's not, I don't think it's on the order of it's definitely different. I say this with hesitation, even bringing it up. It's not the downtown capacity study, but might be on the order in terms of capacity, in terms of what it would take on, which is, I don't recall exactly, but tens of thousands of dollars in cost and enough time on the staff side to manage and oversee 6 months of consulting work. I do agree that I think the appropriate, where we have perhaps some capacity, is on the housing side, not the planning side. I want to be very respectful of what we're going to need to do to make that station area plan work. So I'm not going to tell you we couldn't do it, but that might give you a sense of what the order of magnitude, what kind of level of work is.
Thank you. Councilman Reagan?
Would a feasibility study, would we have to give them direction that it's for affordable housing only? Because I'm not ready to commit to affordable housing only on either one of those sites.
Well, I think
that's where the capacity study was nice, where we could see like what's the max, but it could be affordable. It could be,
yeah, we would need to ask the right question, right? A consultant only helps you answer the question. We would need to ask and work on framing that question of what works. I'm not even sure, right? Our local affordable projects have gotten funded in the last 6 months by the skin of their teeth. I'm not sitting here immediately sure which option might be more viable. But I think we'd have to bake that into what we ask somebody to take a look at.
Yes, I think I would. I mean, I like I said, the overlay, these discussions I think are important. But I think I would prefer to focus our energy on around the smart station, the CHAP area, and kind of what we're already looking at.
Thank you. So I'm not sure. I don't think we've got 3 people who want to proceed with this question this moment. Is that correct? So, okay, so no.
Thanks for the thoughtful and spirited discussion and looking forward to having it again next year.
It is, I appreciate you bringing it up. It is a good idea. And so it has started and that's important.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. So do we have any questions about the goals that we've been looking at here tonight about approving them from council? No? If not, I'll open this to public comment. See if anybody wants to comment on our goals here. Not seeing anyone come forward. We'll bring it back for, what are we asking, adoption?
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
So on the housing item, I think Councilmember Higley put it on for the goals that's moving forward in this proposal. One of the things that we are talking about is around, I think it's regarding, okay, the language says prioritizing options to eliminate/reduce barriers to encourage housing development. So the language says prioritize options to eliminate, reduce barriers, cost, fees, streamlining policies to encourage housing development within our current guidelines. Very supportive of this, looking forward to having it come back. I'm wondering if that is something where, like what, I'm asking the city manager, kind of what does that look like to you? Or are we going to do like a workshop where we can have, you know, a menu of items and kind of get into it more, just knowing that housing and development and affordability continues to be the #1 challenging issue that we hear nonstop about in the community, wanting to make sure that that item, as we have it on the goals and it's going to move forward, like what's the vehicle you think that how it will come back to us, given that we don't have a housing element work group anymore, and kind of like what's the right way to tackle it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is broad. And so we might not all be conceiving of it in the same way. And I see it as a kind of a living discussion that will take place in multiple chunks. We will have soon an initial conversation with the council about some of our fee structures, for instance. That's something that is relevant to this. We will also, I think in August, we are penciling in, I hope to meet the date, a conversation about, and I think this relates to a different goal, but about all of the housing legislation that's coming down the chute from Sacramento. I think that will give way to conversations about which of these tools, if we call them, some of them, we may or may not consider them good things or bad things, but they're here. And which of those should we maybe try to play up and accentuate as opportunities to get more housing in certain places? I think this happens in phases. I don't immediately know that there's an easy way to sit down for 2 hours and talk about all of the ways that we eliminate barriers. I think that right now, I'm not sure how we would structure that in a way that's kind of, we could actually work with. So I see this as kind of a recurring theme that probably comes back to you in a handful of chunks over the coming year. And that probably evolves a little bit. Obviously, we'll be looking as we do that for feedback from the council on where you might want to dig in more. So this is not going to be a one staff report and we're done kind of goal.
That sounds good. I think the way that it's structured in this way that we have it written, costs, fees, streamlining, and policies, I think because it is such a monumental thing to really try to tackle, it would be nice, as you said, to break it up into chunks, but to give it the energy that it deserves in terms of how we can embrace all the different components of it. So that would just be my request, is as it's, it's not just like one quick item from a staff member in one meeting and all of a sudden we're like, yay, we solved housing, because we know that it's going to take a lot more than that.
I wish we could, right?
Magic wand, magic.
Yeah, Councilmember Higley.
And I don't remember all the specifics, but part of what inspired that was Buffy Wicks had commissioned an entire study on how you can cut through some of the red tape, things like that. There was, after the fires in LA, there's some resolutions that were passed about different creative ideas on how we can streamline things. You're seeing some of those on the Coastal Commission, I'm sure now. There's a lot of great ideas out there. The County of Sonoma has done some things with waiving fees. So I think that's kind of my thought is, all right, we know that we are very proactive when it comes to housing. Are there things that we can do? What are the ideas in the context of Healdsburg? Because I think anybody that's been on council with me knows I don't like the idea of, well, this city had an ordinance. Let's just change Sebastopol to Healdsburg and let's do it. So we're very unique. We can do things our own way, but that's kind of where that came from. So yeah, there's a lot of things that will go in there, but I think there's, to the city manager's point, once we kind of see where things are coming down from the state, that is really going to help inform us and maybe even put some wind in the sails.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly, you had another comment? No?
I move to adopt approve the city council goals for fiscal year 25-26.
I'll second.
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that good discussion. Thank you, City Manager, or Assistant City Manager for first report. Appreciate it. Good job. Okay, so moving on to new business, we've got the speed limit reduction evaluation. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Mitchell, Vice Mayor Harrod, City Council members. Kurt Bates with your Department of Public Works and Transportation. I'm pleased to be here tonight to introduce for your consideration the speed limit reduction evaluation proposal to decrease speed limits on various street segments in the city of Healdsburg as allowed by recently changed state law and updated guidance in the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Next slide, please. City staff worked with the Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authority staff and the selected design consultant, Farron Pierce, to analyze existing street segments and create this proposal to decrease speed limits on various street segments within the city. Tonight's agenda includes the following. This speed limit reduction evaluation is part of the overall countywide Vision Zero Action Plan project. We will discuss speed limit reduction evaluation purpose, the updated process for setting speed limits, the recommended speed limit reductions, as well as next steps, and then questions at the end. Next slide. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Margot Ocañas with the Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authorities to talk more about the speed limit reduction proposal and the overall components of the Vision Zero project. It has been great to collaborate with the Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authorities, and Margot has been the lead with SCTCA for the overall Vision Zero project, which for Healdsburg includes both this speed limit reduction effort before you tonight, as well as currently ongoing project to update the city's safe routes to school planning documents, which will be presented to council for consideration at a future date. Margot?
Well, thank you, Kurt. Pleasure to be for the city this evening. It is my first time. So again, a pleasure to be here. It's a beautiful city, and it has been really wonderful partnering with Kurt and Larry Zimmer. It was wonderful to hear about your city goals and that movement of infrastructure and blending with your climate mobilization strategy. Kind of a great segue for the fact that we have recently rebranded ourselves, as Kurt called out, from SCTA and RCPA to the Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authorities, really with that intent and deliberate focus on transportation improvement and climate. So we are here today, many thanks to the partnership of Kurt and Larry. In 2023, we submitted to the US DOT for a Safe Street and Roads planning application, which we were awarded. And for that project, there are two very distinct City of Healdsburg tasks. Again, as Kurt mentioned, the umbrella project is the countywide Vision Zero Action Plan with those two specific City of Healdsburg tasks. Again, many thanks to Kurt and Larry, who their aspiration was to kind of fast track the speed limit reduction activities. So in partnership with Farron Pierce and Angelica and her team, between January and now, we have moved very quickly through what I would consider a very robust analysis process, which will be shared with you this evening, the potential recommendations or the recommendations that come out that could possibly adopted include the reduction of speed limits in school zones, which could be a potential great lead into our planning of engineering treatments around schools as part of the Safe Routes to School task. So one component for addressing safety in school zones would be the speed reduction, in addition to the other engineering treatments that we are reviewing around schools, and we will come back to this council in the fall to share those recommendations with you. So a pleasure to be here this evening, and would like to introduce the true experts, beginning with Angelica with Farren Pierce. Thank you.
Thank you, Margot. Good evening, council members. It's nice to be before you. My name is Angelica Rocha, and I'm a transportation planner from Farren Pierce, the consultant team that was selected to support SCTCA and City of Healdsburg. Margot just spoke to this slide, but essentially this task that we're going to talk to you about is item number 2, which is part of 4 kind of distinct tasks that are happening that was funded by this grant program. Next slide. So just before I kick off, I'm going to talk about kind of the process and actions for this particular item. The last time that the city discussed kind of setting posted speed limits and ordinance associated to that was in 2022. And so today you will all receive this presentation, and this will be the first ordinance reading for the recommendations. If all goes well and we reach consensus, we'll be back in June to have a second reading of the ordinance and adopt the recommended speed limit reductions. Next slide. So the purpose of this project, sort of distinct into these 3 columns here, the lowering speeds reduces crash severity. And so this is a critical element and a goal that we're trying to do to impose to help the city reach 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our roadways. Having lower posted speed limits also allows for expanded design options. As Margot mentioned, with lower posted speeds, there's more countermeasures and treatments that are available to the city when making design decisions, such as curb extensions or road diets or narrowing a travel lane that makes sense only on lower posted speed roads. And then lastly, in alignment with existing plans, before today, you've heard and adopted an active transportation plan, a local roadway safety plan, and then this project will also sort of help move forward the Safe Routes to School effort, as Margot mentioned. Next slide. So in the state of California, there are 2 primary processes for establishing posted speed limit. The left is called the default prima facie zones, and those are sort of default speed limit sets to specific roadways types. If you've ever driven on an alleyway, the default speed limit is 15 miles an hour. Residential streets are 25 miles an hour. And those are imposed whether or not a sign is posted, and it's in the California Vehicle Code. So hopefully you remember that from taking your driver's ed. So that's the first way. The second way is an engineering and traffic survey. And so this is essentially a radar that is taken to kind of understand what the observed driver behavior is. And so speed limits are set based on at or below which 85% of drivers are traveling during free flow conditions. And so this is really the crux of how speed limits are set in the nation, and really kind of been the founding principles of how we've set speed limits historically. And next slide. But there's been, as Kurt mentioned, changing legislation at the statewide level to enhance safety. And so since 2021, with the first California Assembly Bill 43, that really called for advancing flexibility and posted speed limit, taking into considerations that's not just how fast people are traveling, but are there lots of pedestrians? Is this a downtown area? And certain things that are called forward to sort of better design our roadways, especially when they've been overbuilt and have more capacity than necessary. This illustration is just meant to highlight the many iterations that got us to here. The most recent change happening in April 2025, earlier this year, and those were kind of the critical pieces that set forth this process. Next slide. So this screen here illustrates the criteria that we used and the criteria that's specifically included in the California MUTCD, which is essentially the document that outlines how signs are posted, how striping is posted, and really dictates a lot of the transportation infrastructure that you see today. So the top row illustrates criteria based on that 85th percentile speed, so how fast vehicles are traveling, like I mentioned, and then also some performance metrics like safety, whether there crashes are happening there or if there's lots of activity such as sidewalks, crosswalks, etc. The bottom row indicates kind of more land use characteristics. Are there school zones, senior facilities, and is this located within a business activity area? And so all of these were key considerations that we used to determine whether or not a reduction would be recommended. Next slide. And so the map before you also was included in your agenda packet as the map exhibit of recommended speed limit reductions. The city selected 29 roadways for this initial effort, and those were the streets that were most suitable to meet the needs of the updated guidelines. And the output here is visualizing recommendations in posted speed ranging from 15 miles an hour around school zones to 35 mile an hour on sort of the roadways that sort of are on the north and south ends of this and east and west ends of the city. This map illustrates three things that I'll just kind of point you to. First is the recommended posted speed limits. Those are highlighted in ranges and gradients of blue. It also illustrates schools, which are the kind of reddish pink shapes or polygons that are presented there, and the posted speed limit around those areas when children are present. And this generally means when school hours or when children are playing in fields, and it's up to officers to enforce that. All schools in the city of Healdsburg were evaluated to determine whether or not they satisfy the requirements that the MUTCD requests or requires of schools to have their posted speed be 15 miles an hour when children are present. And then lastly, I'll just point you to the third kind of thing that this map is illustrating, and it's the dashed line, which indicate locations that were evaluated, but ultimately a change in recommendations did not occur. Next slide, please. So before I go through these next 4 slides, I'll just kind of give you the warning that it's lots of tables and rows, and I'm going to have 4 of these particular slides. But what it's meant to illustrate is the roadways, which are listed by streets. It displays the extents, which are the tos and from. And you'll notice a roadway like Healdsburg has many rows on this table, and those are speed zones. And speed zones are determined based on the number of lanes, the changes in the built environment around it. And so there are distinct speed zones set up for many roadways. So Healdsburg, which is one of the largest roadways in the city, has a number of different speed zones. And then I'll point you to the following, the 2 columns on the right-hand side, which illustrate the existing speed limit. And then the last column, which is the recommended speed limit that we're presenting to you all today for consideration. And just highlighting for Healdsburg that, for Healdsburg Avenue, that the recommended speed limits create more of a consistent change in speed from the northern city boundary to the downtown core and then back to the southern city boundary. So you kind of see that they start at 35 mile an hour, transition to 30, 25, 20 in the downtown area, and then makes that same sort of progression in the southern area rather than creating illogical changes in speed limits which are currently present. Next slide, please. Again, just sort of illustrating some of the recommendations that are brought before you. We've mostly included this in the presentation as an opportunity for us to go to specific segments that you might have questions about. So I'm going to just quickly scan through this slide. Next slide, please. And similarly, we have a handful of other roadways from Powell, Fitch, Grove Street. Next slide, please. And rounding out with Center, Grant, Plaza, and North. And I will just note that in the agenda packet, you received a table that that indicates more details than what's described here on the screen before you, which indicates kind of when there was, it indicates the criteria that was used, which was, the column is titled applicable speed limit criteria. So those criteria, as I mentioned at the top end, what we use to consider that reduction recommendation. And then lastly, kind of why the recommendation that's being proposed to you here. And with that, I will pass it to Kurt. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Angelica. So the next steps for this item would be for council to weigh in on the recommendations presented to you tonight. And then subsequently, staff will finalize the engineering and traffic surveys and bring back to council for a second reading to adopt an ordinance with the updated speed limits. Then the ordinance would take effect 30 days after adoption of the ordinance. And at that time, staff would be posting updated speed limit signs in the affected areas. And that would include removing and replacing existing signs where the speed limit has decreased and installing new speed limit signs where there were previously no signs. And it's important to note that it's required that law enforcement would only be able to issue warning citations for the 30 days following posting of the new signs to allow people opportunity to get used to the reduced speeds. And then it's also important to note that the item before you tonight, as Angelica mentioned, it looked at various street segments in the city, and that in the future, with the new tools, with the law being changed, we have the tools in place now where we can look at other street segments, and council may direct staff to do so in the future. Next slide. So with that, the recommended action tonight is to introduce for first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg amending section 10.50.050 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code, prima facie streets established by engineering and traffic survey regarding speed limits in the City of Healdsburg. Next slide. That concludes this presentation. With that, the team is here and available for questions.
Thank you for that report. Does council have questions? Ron?
Yeah, I've got quite a few on this, as you know, from my many years of driving, and it has always been, if it's unposted, it's 25 miles an hour in California. There are new technical gadgets such as Waze, radar detectors, things that display the posted speed limit. How long does it take from a change of a speed limit in a municipality to show up in those type of informations like GPS and Waze?
Thank you for the question, council member. I do not know the answer to that question. I'm not sure if anyone else on the team does as well.
Sorry about that. I don't work in app development, but this is something we can certainly explore and would be happy to respond back.
Yeah, because I mean, to me, that's important to know before I make a vote on something, to know what the effect is, because how do you know? The other question I have is, are we looking at upgrading or repairing any other type of street signs that I know we've gotten some complaints about faded signs and so forth? Are we looking at improving those signs or just removing and changing speed limit signs?
So this action tonight is just for speed limit signs. However, if there are other traffic signs in the city, we can certainly look at replacing those signs as needed.
I'll just add to clarify that. My understanding that I think Councilmember Edwards is referring to is some of the street signs that are overhead in the intersections. And we are looking to update those, but it's a different process. You guys can jump in, but I think it's
I know we brought this up,
exponentially different cost discussion if you're looking at getting up there in the intersections versus.
We're aware of both of the larger overhead signs, which are more costly to replace because it requires a contractor with two person lifts to get up there to be able to put that sign in there, and the traffic lane closure, which has to move as they move to both sides or all four corners of an intersection. It becomes quite costly, and we don't have the funding in the current fiscal year. We have purchased many of those signs. We're also aware of some of the smaller street signs, and that's part of our regular maintenance, the bottom of the iceberg, as Assistant City Manager was referring to before. And there is some deferred work in replacing those, but it's not terrible and we are keeping up with it. But tonight's item is just this. It's really passing this ordinance to change the speed limits. And then we're going to follow through with moving some money around to be able to change the speed limit signs before we do anything.
Okay, yeah, my question was just in our priorities. That's what I was trying to get
Yeah.
at, so.
And this would be a higher priority because council and the public have voiced the desire to lower speeds throughout the city, improving safety for cyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles. And so we have taken that as a priority. And if that isn't a priority, now would be a good time to say, we could still pass this ordinance, but implementing it would come a little later if that were council's wishes.
Yeah, we're a tourist town. And we have not just our own residents here, but we have lots of people visiting. And it's no fun being labeled as a speed trap. So, thank you.
I don't think that's anyone's intention. And we will not behave that way. I can speak for our police department as well.
Sorry if I may circle back to your first question. I just quickly searched Google and it looks like Google makes updates every 24 to 48 hours. And it makes updates between 500 and 600 times a year to posted speed limit. But one thing I think that's critical to understand is that while an app may take some time, 24, 48, et cetera, hours to update, that doesn't influence the officer's ability to enforce, since speed of vehicle a driver should be using the speedometer on their vehicle and are required to have a speedometer that is working accurately. And as Kurt mentioned, the police officers will be issuing warning tickets for the first 30 days. So I don't assume there will be any sort of lack of data into Waze or Google during that time frame.
Yeah, my concern is that, driving the same streets for 33 years, you kind of get used to the speed, you adjust, you know what that looks like. And are you going to be looking for a new sign? I mean, I know what we do here is important, but is how many people are glued to this speed limit addition to know that, oh, now the street I've been driving down for 35 years, this is a lower speed limit. And it may, we even have second home people here and they might not have been here for the 30-day period and have that happen.
There will also be social media effort. The signs typically have the additional flags on there to draw people's attention. So we're going to get the word out as best we can. And again, I think everyone's going to understand that this is a change and it does take some time for people to become accustomed to that. And I do not think the concern of us appearing to be a speed trap and going out there to give out a bunch of tickets isn't the goal. The goal is to reduce speeds and improve safety.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. There's a couple spots in the recommendations where the speed limit is recommended to go to 35, and that's the ceiling here, as far as I can tell. And it's just two locations, and I'm wondering if there's a compelling reason why those have to be. I mean, there's just two, and I know that on the way in, and on both sides of the town, on the north and south end of it, but. I wonder if there's a compelling reason to set that limit there and not at 30 to be more consistent with the rest of the city, other than maybe the rationale is just that they have a very high speed limit now. I've always thought the speed limits in those areas were kind of ridiculously high, but I'm not afraid to bring them down to 30. I think that would make sense. I don't, maybe that's a big shift for people, but I feel confident that people could get used to that. So that would be that's my only suggestion. I mean, overall, I just wanted to share that I'm really excited to see this change coming. I think it's overdue and it's going to really have a lot of great benefits. But, if I were going to suggest any changes, it would be to reduce those two locations from 35 to 30.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Harold. So those two particular locations are on Healdsburg Ave on the north end and the southern end near the city boundary. And so the reason why we ultimately made the recommendation of going to 30 miles an hour, it's actually the full recommendation that's allowable based on the criteria. So at least on the northern end, let me start with that. Yeah, the northern end, that particular roadway, Oh, wait, no, that's not right. 30, okay. Yes. Okay, so that particular roadway qualified as a safety corridor and a bike ped generator. For those two particular criterias, you can only choose one of the options. And with that, you get a reduction of 5 miles an hour. So the existing posted speed limit is 35 or 40 miles an hour. And so with that 5 mile an hour reduction, you can go to 35 mile an hour. So there isn't actually a feasible mechanism at this time based on the 85th percentile speed to go down to 30. And then similarly, it's the same situation down at the southern city boundary, which are both, again, a safety corridor and a bike ped generator. So for those two instances, while they are the highest speed limit, we are using the full reduction allowable, at least with current guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Kelly.
I'm curious with the changes to the North Healdsburg Avenue plan. I know I'm getting the name wrong with the like kind of larger scale complete streets project that's going to be taking place along Healdsburg Avenue from Powell to the northern city limit. And because we do not have a protected bike lane after the Foss Creek Trail ends, and we're going to be directing bicyclists and pedestrians who use the Foss Creek Trail at the Grove Street intersection just north of the Triangle lot at the community center site for those bicyclists to merge onto the roadway and to have the bike lane on the roadway just south of Parkland Farm Boulevard, all the way up and around that corner to the new fire station, the substation on the north end. When that roadway project is complete, will there be an opportunity, per Councilmember Harrod's point, because we're building so much housing on the north end of town, we're really creating a lot more, people who will be walking and bicycling to Enzo Village, North Village, New Saggio Hills Affordable Housing, the new park location that'll be big and beautiful when it's all done, all on the north end of town, and will be generating most likely more bike and ped traffic on the north end there. Is there an opportunity in the future, once that project's done, to relook at what you just said to see if it is problematic, or if we're putting bicyclists in harm's way on this roadway? Can we look at evaluating it in the future?
Yes, the answer is yes. And actually, we are required to do so when we have a significant project on a roadway that basically essentially transforms the streetscape. We have to do a new engineering and traffic survey. So Healdsburg Avenue, the segment you're referring to, from Powell to the northern project limits, March Avenue, and then the Grove Street project, those are all 3 segments in the city where we would be reevaluating once the project's complete to determine whether or not it's feasible to have a further reduction, and then if we want to do so. And that action, of course, would come back to council for consideration.
Great, thanks so much.
Councilmember Higley.
In looking at these, my first thought, some specific areas, and I kind of have the opposite opinion of Vice Mayor Herod, is I understand the slowing down as you're coming in to town on the north end of town, but I would almost prefer to see these speeds drop for say like Parkland Farms to Dry Creek March Avenue, have that drop when the Complete Streets project is done. Right now, I mean, it's literally 5 lanes. 35 is, I think, a pretty comfortable speed for that section of the road. And then the other thought I had was on the section of Grove Street. Where was it? Healdsburg Avenue to Dry Creek Road. There's not a ton of driveways coming in and out. And so I'm wondering if the goal here was just to reduce everything you can versus some of these that are kind of connector corridors for commuters that, I don't feel the speeds as being outrageously, high. I could see where, the northern city limits to Parkland Farms Boulevard, where that's 40 miles an hour, where you're coming off of, some higher speeds. And then now we have, to Councilmember Kelly's point, we've got Enzo Village, we've got a lot of pedestrians to, kind of bring that down like we did with, in front of the Mill District. I remember that was controversial when the parking was going in and people slowing down, kind of get them slowing down before the roundabout. So just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on those 2 sections.
Thank you for that. I guess I'll start, and then Angelica, if you would like to add anything, that would be great. So the evaluation before the council tonight is, here's the new law, here's what can be done. So in our chart, in the chart that you have and that was presented earlier, you have the existing speed limit and you have the maximum allowable speed limit reduction, and then you have the recommendation. And so it's really up to the council's discretion tonight on, what you choose to do. So Angelica, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just the only thing that I will add is that Dry Creek Road qualified again as a safety corridor and a bike ped generator. And I think what's important to consider when thinking about those criteria is that a safety corridor are roadways where there's the highest concentration of fatal and serious injury crashes. And the one thing we know that's causing them is speeding. And so this is sort of one step of many that can reduce the number of fatal and serious injury crashes. Additionally, it's bike ped generator, meaning that there is a lot of different activity beyond vehicles. So something to consider. And I think your second question there was the goal to reduce to the maximum that you can? And I will just share that that wasn't the goal. Our goal was to present the maximum allowable, and then based on engineering judgment from our team, as well as the city, and then coordination with PD to understand what they had capacity to enforce. So it's sort of multiple steps that were taken into consideration. There are many roadways that we are recommending a reduction of at least 5 miles an hour, but there's very few roadways where we are taking that maximum allowable because we wanted to make sure that it's logical for drivers to understand. It makes sense given the land use and the characteristics of the particular segment.
So I guess Dry Creek was kind of the cross street.
Mhm.
So the ones I was asking about was Healdsburg Avenue, and then
Okay.
Grove Street. So Grove Street connects up to Healdsburg Avenue, and on the southern end is both of them are Dry Creek.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of where I had the question, because the current speeds are not outrageous in my opinion along Grove Street, where you have a lot of industrial, you have some apartments at the end there. And then Healdsburg Avenue, where the Complete Streets project is going in, to me, it makes sense. Once that project is done, then, it drops down. I mean, it's not anything I'm gonna jump out on, but it seems to me like that would be the appropriate time to do that.
Yeah.
So just specifically on Healdsburg Avenue and Grove Street,
Sure.
those
Could we
segments.
pull up the slides quickly and go to the slide that's associated with Healdsburg Ave, just so we can get a sense. Because as Kurt mentioned, sorry? The map or the table? The table, I think is.
I think the map's also helpful. We kind of went through it fast, but it shows all the streets you looked at where you're
Yeah.
not recommending a change. And I
Mhm.
think that's also helpful to see kind of how the evaluation and the expertise came into play.
Yeah. If you think that would be better than the table, that makes sense. And so just to clarify, we're talking about Healdsburg Ave, and it's specifically the segment that's between Dry Creek and Powell. Is that correct? Or
No, Dry Creek and Grove Street.
okay, so sort of that sort of
Well,
upper
Parkland Farms Boulevard, which
Yeah.
is like just north of that. So it's that
Yeah.
those two sections
Mhm.
where it's labeled Healdsburg Avenue and Grove Street.
Yeah. So as Kurt mentioned, the goal of today is to make a recommendation. So if the council would like to recommend a different recommendation than what we are suggesting, that's on the table. But I will just share that for that particular roadway, it's currently posted at 35 miles an hour. And with the criteria that's allowable, it's the rounding down criteria. So when a radar is between a posted speed limit, you can round down. And then similarly, it's also on a bike, has a bike ped generator. So there's activity for pedestrians and bicyclists around that area.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. I just want to kind of, when we heard the beginning of the presentation talking about the Vision Zero project, which is a countywide effort to look at where we see the most crashes of automobiles and where we've seen the largest danger for fatalities, and then where we've heard from residents about where they feel unsafe walking or biking. We have heard, and some of the survey work that was done was with our senior community, talking to seniors and asking what's preventing you from being able to get out of your house and feel like you can comfortably walk to town, or what's preventing you from, being able to give up your car if you feel like you're unsafe in driving. And so I think knowing where those accidents have been occurring in front of Plank Coffee at that intersection by Valero, and that we continue to see that intersection when people are racing to get on or off the freeway there, it really is one of those places in town where I think we've been incredibly lucky that we haven't had more fatal accidents at that intersection, because I've seen so many close calls there, and we have the data that supports we're having challenges in and around that Grove Street and Dry Creek Road area. So while I don't think reducing the speed limit is going to be like the thing that makes it, that much more safe, we know we have a big future project that we're going for a $16 million grant to change that intersection someday. But in the meantime, I do think, this consulting firm that we've hired, that the county's working with, that this is like a regional effort that we're one of the 9 cities that are a part of. I feel like we really should rely on the expertise of the evaluation that they've done, and then also look at all the red dotted lines, which is where they're saying we've evaluated all these streets and we're not recommending a change for the reasons that they shared. So I feel really strongly that I think we should be doing whatever we can to reduce the likelihood of someone getting killed in our town. That's like our job as public safety, and that because they've worked with police, and their consultation on this, that we should trust the experts. And yeah, people might grumble like, oh, it's going to take me 2 minutes longer to get to where I'm going, but we might save someone's life. And I feel like at the end of the day, the balance of that is like worth the hassle of reducing your speed 5 miles an hour. And so I want to support the recommendations, and I feel really strongly that this is one of those things that we have the ability to actually improve people's ability to get in and around our town, to get out of their cars should they want to, or just to slow down. And frankly, lives will be saved because of it. So it feels like a pretty compelling reason to me. Thank you.
Yeah, I have one follow-up question. I know that on North Street, from Center to Healdsburg Avenue, or from Center to East Street, there was a speed survey radar on those corners. Were all of these streets where the suggested, because we got the 85th percentile, was there a speed survey done on all of these streets?
Yes, all these streets have active engineering and traffic survey data, and that's the basis of how the criteria then moves forward.
So we know what the current 85th percentile speed is on all of these streets?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Vice Mayor, did you know? Okay,
I
so
just have a
go ahead.
comment. Yeah, the only comment I have is, there's a big difference between Matheson Street that's dotted and is evaluated whether you're gonna raise the speed limit or lower the speed limit or not. And the 2 sections that I highlighted, which are currently at 35 and 30 miles an hour, dropping to 30 and 25. I'm just arguing, or I'm just saying that the difference of 5 miles an hour on those streets, which don't have a ton of, we're not talking about the intersections specifically, it's the sections between the intersections. So I want to make sure that, my point is made that, yeah, I agree that intersections where these issues are having, we are focusing on those, and we've done a lot over the years to, help with access and turn lanes and things like that. But I just don't know if it's necessary to drop the speed from 30 miles an hour, which is already slow on Grove Street, fairly long straightaway, not a lot of driveways. And same with Healdsburg Avenue. Once we have the Complete Streets project done, absolutely. But again, it's not that big of a deal, but I want to separate out the comments about people dying and car crashes and those comments with kind of what my point was, is these are relatively straight, they're not intersections that I'm talking about, and just wanted to make that point.
And I just had a question about sort of the logistic reality of changing the speed limits, and maybe it's for Chief Jenkins, but will people, even if they get tickets, really reduce their speeds? I mean, what kind of, maybe maybe it's naive on my part to ask the question, but it feels like, to Councilmember Hagley's point on those sections that we're talking about here, you can post the speed limit at 30. People are still going to probably go 35. So how do we mitigate that?
I don't know really how to answer that question.
You write tickets.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. There are people who are going to drive whatever speed they're going to drive, regardless of whether they get a ticket. I know there's people that will get tickets and they have it mapped out to, I can do traffic school every 18 months, so I can afford one every 18 months. Other people will drive, get the ticket, and deal with that. Others are very fearful of getting a ticket and will comply with whatever speed limit is there and or go under it. So it's really a personal choice decision that people will make on obeying those speed limits.
And does the police department issue a lot of speeding tickets in the city of Healdsburg?
I would say no.
Yeah, I don't see it. But.
Yeah. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I know it is on our lower end of where citations are written, speed.
And are there a lot of traffic accidents as well within these regions, within the city as well?
So our major traffic collision areas are along the major corridors. Dry Creek and Grove is a cluster of collisions that we experience. If we were to heat map it, it'd be there. You'd see a few downtown, and March, Dry Creek area would be another cluster.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it just, I certainly appreciate lowering speed limits. I just wonder if we're going to really achieve what we want to do here, the way people drive and their habits. So,
Yeah, I'll follow up.
yes, thank you.
So just a couple of things that came out of that discussion. So one of your first questions was kind of people following the speed limit. So I'll address that in just a second. But your second question was, where are traffic collisions happening? And so as part of this analysis, we did look at all roadways in the city of Healdsburg and narrowed in on the roadways that have the highest concentration of crashes, and mostly fatal and serious injury crashes. And so that map is available to you in the methodology document that's in the agenda packet. It is attachment A, I believe. And so that's readily available to you to explore many of the roadways that are presented to you on the screen, and then in the table, wherever you see safety corridor under the applicable speed limit reduction criteria, means that that is a roadway that has the highest concentration of fatal and serious injury crashes and collisions overall in the city. And then your second question was, are people going to follow the rules? And I have some success stories to share. Santa Rosa was the first city in the Sonoma County region to implement on AB 43. In their initial kind of sweep, they reduced posted speed limit on 40 roadways. That was 2 years ago. And then this year, they're set to reduce posted speed on 40 more roadways. And so as part of that, they've been doing before-after studies, which is a helpful tool in understanding kind of the benefits of the decisions you're making here today. And they've shown really significant improvements. And then also, if we could pull up the presentation, I have a couple of other examples that we can just look at on, and it's the back pocket slide number 22. Represents a couple of other examples, not local, but demonstrating kind of places where either on one corridor or citywide reductions to posted speed alone were made, and kind of the compliance associated to that. And I think what's important is while a posted speed might be 35 mile an hour, and there will be people who go over it, it's really important for us to make decisions based on the general population. I think the general population will see a speed limit sign and follow the rules. And the difference between surviving when a vehicle is driving 40 miles an hour versus 35 and 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour is very different. The chances of surviving at 35 mile an hour is 68% likely to survive, and that's not very high. And so 65 or 35 is sort of what we're recommending as the upper threshold based on what we can do, but just something to consider when making that decision.
Yeah, thank you for that. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, that's very compelling, as are most of the reasons that have gone into what you presented us tonight, just locally, but also statewide. And for me, it's and I don't really find any reasons not to lower the speed limits. I mean, mostly we're looking at people's willingness to comply or their expectations about what the road can handle, or and so on. So yeah, there's a mind shift for people to drive slower, but I think that just takes a little bit of time, and not everyone's going to do it. But that's not a reason enough to not implement these changes. I think these changes are going to really be meaningful. Even with the slight reduction in fatality, I think that it's compelling that we should move forward with this. So thank you for all the research that's gone into this. I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer. But it's good to consider what people would like to drive, but I don't think in the end it's really that important.
Thank you. So if there's no further questions right now, we'll open this up to public comment. Do we have anybody? Welcome.
My name's Laura Bracken. I live on University Street, right around the corner from Ron, between North and Piper. And I know University Street has to have the emergency vehicles. Totally get that. But there are a lot of seniors, kids, dogs that walk along that street. My neighbor just lost her dog by a car that was driving probably 40 miles an hour. And for some reason, they seem to go from Piper to North and just speed up like crazy. And it was pretty traumatic, and that was just a dog, but it was her dog. And I would just like you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I'll bring it back. Would someone like to make a motion?
Before we make a motion, everything about the principle of this, I agree with. Lowering speed reduces the impact traffic. I know that on my street, they consider that north to Piper a raceway because the street widens up, it goes fast there. But this to me is about changing behavior. And I don't think we have done enough in the front of this to change the behavior before we change the law. I just feel better that when people understand the law, what's coming, this is what we're going to be doing. It has been talked about, but it hasn't been publicized. I would have liked to see signs going out of, we're going to be reducing speed, social media comments, post about this is what was going to happen beforehand. I think law is, to me, is not strong when you say, well, we're going to change the law now, but we're going to give a 30-day exception. It would be better to, if we're going to enforce it. I also am concerned that I know that we have people talking about speeds, and it's hard now to get officers out there because we don't have a huge police force. We don't have a specific traffic officer that is dedicated to just watching traffic. So I think that this is well thought of, but I don't think the implication is going about it in the right way. So I just can't go with that without it being complete.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'd like to make a motion to introduce for first reading by title only, waiving further reading of the text and ordinance amending section 10.50.050 of the Healdsburg Municipal Code, prima facie streets established by the Engineering and Traffic Survey regarding speed limits in the city of Healdsburg.
Second the motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Edwards,
No.
Councilmember Higley,
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod,
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you very much for the report and the information. So next we have the Healdsburg Electrification Energy and Demand Forecast 2025-2045 Utility Conservation Analyst Tara Sampson. Welcome.
Hello, Mayor and Council members. Thank you for having me here tonight to discuss energy and demand scenarios model, one of the actions from the climate mobilization strategy. My name is Tara Sampson, our utility conservation analyst, and we also have Ryan from Rinkin Consultants joining virtually. Tonight's recommended actions are to receive an informational presentation or an informational report on the long-range energy and demand forecast to estimate future electricity consumption and peak demands, accept the most likely scenario forecast with a planning margin from the community-wide energy and demand forecasting, and direct the utility director to bring forward additional renewable and zero carbon resources for City Council consideration to meet increasing state requirements. Next slide. Starting with some background, the Climate Mobilization Strategy, CMS, was adopted in 2023 with a major focus on building and transportation electrification to achieve greenhouse gas reductions. Electrification meaning switching from fossil fuel appliances and vehicles to electric alternatives, as well as a focus on clean energy. Next slide. In addition to the CMS targets, market trends for heat pump adoption are increasing for both HVAC and water heaters, as well as cumulative electric vehicle sales in California. Next slide. How does Healdsburg plan for this increased electricity consumption and peak demand? The very first action item listed in the CMS is to develop an electric energy and demand forecast. We've completed these first two boxes to develop an energy and demand model and then model various electrification scenarios to see their impacts. And now we need to use the model results to guide new energy procurements and identify future resources, policies, and programs to limit negative impacts on the grid. Next slide. For the model, the intent was to develop a long-range energy and demand model that Healdsburg Electric that we can use to estimate electricity consumption and peak demand through 2045 under various electrification scenarios. And we did this by developing the model that uses various data sources to model citywide baseline electricity consumption and forecast future consumption and peak demand. This included establishing an hourly baseline, building in electrification inputs, developing the scenarios, and determining the results. Next slide. As shown here, a variety of data sources were utilized to develop the baseline model and the electrification changes from buildings, EVs, and on-site solar. Next slide. So then the scenarios were developed based on different levels of CMS achievement to provide a range of potential future scenarios with underachieving the CMS, achieving, and overachieving the CMS. The most likely scenario is based on current trends, staff and consultant expertise, the community survey results, and expected state regulations. In general, the most likely scenario slightly exceeds the CMS building electrification targets, but slightly underachieves the CMS transportation electrification targets. Next slide. And the scenario forecasting looked at two main aspects of electricity: the electricity consumption, meaning the amount of electricity used by the community that would need to be generated by our energy resources, such as solar farms, and the peak demands, meaning the maximum amount of electricity needed at any given moment in time, which our system and infrastructure would need to be capable of supplying. And I'll go through the results for both of these aspects. Next slide, please. So let's jump into the results. There are going to be a number of charts, but we will walk through each of them. This chart shows our historic consumption from 2000 to 2020, with 2023 and 2024 consumption going into the future. Note that 2024 was already quite a bit higher than past years, likely due to the extreme heat from last summer and already occurring electrification adoption. Next slide. And now the chart with the CMS scenarios overlaid to show the range of potential future electricity consumption. And two things to note here. Even in the underachieved scenario and accounting for continuing customer solar installations, our electricity consumption is expected to increase quite substantially compared to the historic consumption. And for all three of these scenarios, 2024 already surpassed the 2025 forecast, again, likely due to the extremely hot summer we had last year. Next slide. And now with the most likely scenario in light green, which has a 75% increase compared to current annual consumption by 2045. And for comparison, the California Energy Commission's local reliability scenario for Healdsburg in dark green. Next slide. And finally, with two modified versions of the most likely scenario. One with hotter summers that would increase electricity consumption in the summer months, and one with a 10% planning margin to account for system losses and other factors that could increase electricity consumption above the forecasted amounts. Staff recommends beginning to seek new energy resources that would meet the community needs for the most likely plus planning margin scenario. Next slide. And now let's jump into peak demands and how they might change in the different scenarios. This chart shows the monthly peak demand with only building electrification. As time goes on, you can see in the 2045 chart in the bottom middle that with only building electrification, our peak demand would continue to be in the summer evenings, but the winter demands would also increase with the adoption of electric heat pump heating. And all scenarios were relatively similar with their peak demand trends. Next slide. Let's add EVs. And adding EVs on top of building electrification demonstrates that future peak demands will be driven predominantly by EV charging behaviors, with our peak demand eventually transitioning to the winter mornings and increasing by 44% in the most likely scenario compared to the current peak demands. This is in part due to the assumption of EV drivers predominantly using a delayed finish by departure, meaning have my vehicle ready by the time I need to leave, charging behavior, which has some overlap in the morning with charging finishing up while residents are beginning to get ready for their days, as well as morning heating in the winter. On the next slide, the model actually allows us to look at a variety of EV charging behaviors. And shown here is how those different EV charging regimes would impact the most likely scenario. The black line is our current peak demands, and the lime green line is the Healdsburg specific scenario and charging regime that we just saw on the previous slide. The orange line, best case charging, assumes smaller sized EVs, more workplace charging, and an immediate, as slow as possible charging behavior. The teal line, the one on top there, is the base case charging, assumes smaller sized EVs, no workplace charging, more driving, and and an immediate, as fast as possible charging behavior. And you can see that keeps us with the summer peak, the summer evening peak. An additional worst case scenario with larger sized EVs, no workplace charging, even more driving, and a delayed start at midnight charging behavior was also modeled, but it is not shown here because it was literally off these charts and did not allow for us to visualize the difference between these other scenarios. Well, that's a lot to take in. The critical point here is that we need to diversify and manage EV charging to minimize the impacts to peak demand and move EV charging to take advantage of excess daytime solar as much as possible. Next slide. To summarize, by 2045, building electrification could increase electricity consumption by 17 to 21% in the underachieve to overachieve scenarios. EVs could contribute an additional 55 to 98% increase in annual electricity consumption. But by 2045, in the most likely scenario, we expect a 75% increase in our annual net electricity consumption and a 44% increase in our peak demand. The building electrification impact is smaller than EVs due to the efficiency gains from heat pumps and on-site solar offsets. And again, best practices for EV charging behaviors are critical. Next slide, please. As with any forecast or prediction, there are a number of variables that could increase or decrease what happens in reality. Aspects that could increase the results include accounting for transmission and distribution system losses, hotter summers, additional appliances that are capable of electrification but were not in scope to model, new construction above the scenario model inputs, new state regulations, and EV driving behaviors. For example, EV drivers intentionally filling up in Healdsburg could increase annual consumption by another 18%. Aspects that could decrease the results include higher energy efficiency and different levels of all-electric new construction. For these reasons, staff recommends applying that 10% planning margin to the most likely scenario. And the margin, as well as the forecasted results, could also be reevaluated in a future model update. Next slide, please. But what does this all mean for Healdsburg? There are state renewable and zero carbon targets that increase over time, up to 100% by 2045. The next upcoming compliance will be 52% by 2027, then 60% renewable by 2030, then a total of 90% renewable and zero carbon by 2035, 95% by 2040, and 100% by 2045. The black line shown here is our historic and average current or planned resources, already including the new solar project to be completed in 2028 and phased conversion of the Lodi Energy Center to green hydrogen. The different color lines are where we would need to be for the model scenarios to meet the state requirements. Therefore, for example, the area between the black and purple lines in this is the gap that we need to fill with new renewable and zero carbon energy procurements to meet the state requirements. Next slide. And what could filling this gap look like in the most likely scenario? As I mentioned, the requirement is 52% renewable in 2027. With 2027 quickly approaching, it is most likely that we will use historic renewable energy credits to meet the state compliance, though there are some upcoming solar and battery contracts available through the Northern California Power Agency. The state requirement is 60% renewable in 2030, and after 2030, we must maintain a minimum of 60% renewable with increasing zero carbon sources such as large hydroelectric and green hydrogen. In 2035, to meet the state requirement, we would need all of our existing and currently planned resources, which includes an assumption of converting at least 60% of the Lodi Energy Center to green hydrogen. Plus, we'd need an additional 23 to 29,000 megawatt hours of renewables, which is 52 or more acres of solar, and a wet year with higher than average hydroelectric generation, which can vary widely from year to year. Next slide. To provide an idea of costs for new energy procurements, it is about $650,000 to $750,000 per acre of solar installation, and battery storage is critical paired with new solar installations to capture excess daytime solar and allow us to provide electricity 24/7, 365. And there are costs associated with new renewable and carbon-free energy. Next slide. And much like the rest of the state, Healdsburg will need to reinvest in its electric distribution system. For understanding order of magnitude cost estimations for infrastructure improvements, this includes replace and/or expand transformers at Badger Substation, increase wire and cable sizes to deliver more power, and increase local distribution transformers, the green boxes, to feed EV charging and new heat pump loads. Next slide. However, increased electricity consumption will generate additional revenue from selling more electricity to help offset some of these increased operating costs. And to lessen rate impacts, costs would need to be phased in over time, predicted by long-range energy and peak demand forecasts like this, and considered in the next electric rate study for 2027. Next slide. So the next steps are to work with the NCPA to identify desirable renewable energy contracts to fill the state requirements gap and bring those to council for consideration. Identify infrastructure needs and bring those to council for future consideration and incorporation into future rate studies, and continue working on the CMS actions to promote electrification while reducing grid impacts. And there's a list of programs and actions that we have to do that there. Next slide. This is just a reminder on tonight's recommended actions. And next slide. I'll take any questions or comments, and we also have Rinkin on the line if there are technical questions about the modeling.
Thank you for that report. Very complex, made as simple as you can, I think, for us. Thank you. Do we have questions from council? Councilmember Kelly?
I was definitely taken aback by the costs associated with all of the upgrades, towards the end of the slide presentation, but I know these things are very expensive, so obviously it makes sense. I just, the scale and order of magnitude is a lot. For the replacement of I can't remember what you called them, but the last mile connection transformer boxes, the green boxes, do we typically have developers or people who are, renovating or whatever, did they pay for the upgrades of those boxes when properties go under or when they're major renovation, or is that all the city's cost and we put that on our electric customers to pay for typically on upgrading those?
I will do my best to answer, but our previous utilities director, Terry Crowley, has left. So we do have acting utilities director, Patrick Buse. I'll start with the transformers are something that the electric department does need to continuously monitor. There are distribution transformers that are serving, for example, a number of homes. So when those need upgraded, that's something that needs to be part of the overall system. It's not put on any one customer. For larger projects, I do not know the answer to that. It looked like acting utility director Foos wanted to come up.
Thank you for the question. I'm water and wastewater engineer subbing in for the electric utility director. The correct answer to your question is, as a project comes forward and it requires a new transformer, that's part of the project that they would need to, part of the cost that they need to bear as part of that project coming in.
Councilmember Haley?
Can you clarify on that slide where you were talking about the upcoming costs? I just want clarification. Are those costs of projected improvements based on the projected electricity needs requirement by our community and visitors, or is that to meet the state mandated goals that are being set?
If we could go back one more. This slide and procuring additional renewable electricity and zero carbon resources, I'd say we need to procure new resources, whatever type they may be, fossil fuel or renewable or zero carbon, to meet community needs. To meet the state requirements, those new resources need to be renewable or zero carbon. So I'd say two-part answer to your question here. We need to meet the new community needs. That will require nearly double the amount of electricity generation by 2045. To meet the state requirements, those new energy procurements need to be renewable or zero carbon. Then on the next slide, these estimates came from previous Utility Director Crowley, and I would say these are more so based on the peak demands. What do we need to meet peak demands and supply electricity to meet the maximum amount that could be drawn on the system at any given time?
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
I think we're all focused on the slide. My question falls there is just what's the time frame we're looking at for these expenditures?
So again, for these, the recommended action tonight is to direct the utilities director to start looking for new energy contracts to meet the consumption, new renewable and zero carbon contracts. That's the action that is recommended tonight. You would look at those new contracts would be brought forward for your consideration. That's to get new electricity generation. The costs shown here are for the infrastructure improvements. The recommendation is that those be incorporated into the next rate study, which would take place in 2027.
Thank you.
No further questions. I'll open this up to public comment. Not seeing no one come forward, I'll bring it back to council. Councilmember Edwards?
No, I feel really fortunate, along with Councilman Herod, we were able to attend the long form presentation of this, and it was kind of daunting on just how much the state mandates are going to be required, what we have to come up with. And I think that we are good to start talking about this now. The cost is pretty crazy high. And I think there's new unknown variables that are in this now with the changing of our, for now, possibly EV mandate. So I don't know where we're going to go with this, but at least I feel we have a good plan. And it's nice that we will be looking at this at the rate study. So in other words, we will have constant intervals where we'll be looking at where we are and what we need to go at. So we won't get to a point where it's, oh my gosh, all of a sudden we need to spend $20–30 million, because that's just a huge bite for us. Whereas if we take it in chunks with these rate studies, I think we can be very responsibly going forward.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, motion?
I think we just received the presentation, yeah.
Well, it's adopt a resolution.
Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution accepting the most likely scenario forecast with a planning margin from the community-wide energy and demand forecasting and directing the utility director to bring forward additional renewable and zero carbon resources for city council consideration to meet state requirements.
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to appointments of the City Selection Committee and Mayors and Council Members Association Board of Directors. Raina?
Good evening, Council. I don't have a formal presentation for you this evening. The action is to direct the mayor or her alternate on how to vote at the upcoming June 12th City Selection and Sonoma County Mayors and Council Members Association Board meeting.
Thank you. So who'd like to kick this off? Councilmember Kelly?
I'd just like to share that I think, as we were talking about RENA earlier, and which is governed by the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, this seat, while somewhat kind of invisible to us in terms of its importance in the region, is one of those regional bodies that is so critically important to advocating for Sonoma County. And I think the unique nature of our cities, our 9 cities, as compared to some of the other counties in the Bay Area. So I think it's wonderful that according to the slide, it says Frant, but it's, I think, Frank Quint, that he's interested in the role. I just want to comment that I think Susan Hollingworth Adams from Rohnert Park has been doing a great job advocating for Sonoma County in this seat. And since she's been doing it for, I think, 4 years now, as the primary, I'd like to support seeing her continue in that role. I appreciate that Councilmember Quint, who is brand new, I think, on the city council in Petaluma, is interested in the role. I think that with those regional bodies, what I've noticed is that it takes, not only does it take time to kind of figure out the rules of the road of how does that body function, but to build in your leadership within the bodies so that you can actually be a strong advocate for your region. I don't know if you remember, but this was one of the seats I think that Jake McKenzie held for like 47 years or something. So when it opened up, it hadn't opened up in a very long time. And so I just wanted to comment that I think Susan Adams has been doing a great job in the seat, and I'd love to see her continue forward. And I feel like if we didn't support her, it would kind of be like indicating that she's not doing a good job, which for me personally, I don't think is the case, but also we as a region, as a county, will be better served in having someone who keeps longevity with that seat, because that's kind of how the game is played at some of these regional agencies.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Higley?
Yeah, I would support Susan for the primary seat and then Frank for the alternate seat.
Ron?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Agree also.
So do I. So we're saying Susan as the primary, and although Frank has applied for the primary, we're going to appoint him as the alternate. Agreed. Okay. Do we need to take a vote on this? We do, right?
You don't have to.
Okay. So I just want to mention that Vice Mayor Harrod will be at the meeting to make this vote for the city of Healdsburg. Okay, which is Thursday, I guess, coming up, right? Okay, great. So thank you. It's really, really hard. Yeah, good. I know. Okay, so we're moving right along to the council reports on matters of interest occurring since our previous regular scheduled meeting. Ron, do you want to start?
Yeah, I was at the, when we were talking about our goals, I was at the senior commission meeting last week, and the compassionate community is starting to roll. They've already got a subcommittee of two of the members. Taya is working great with Anna on this, and they're working on funding, and it's really moving forward. They've really got this structured well. So it's nice to see something go from goal planning to really in step, ready to go on that one. I also wanted to mention that I've gotten quite a few constituents stop by when I'm out in front of my house asking me about what's going on at Healdsburg Elementary School with the X's on the trees. There's been some concern about that, so I reached out to Superintendent Vanden Herd. And the problem is that the trees are close to the school foundation, so it's disrupting that, as well as falling on the roof And so that's why those trees do need to be removed. However, there will be new landscaping going in to replace that and update that. So I wanted to update the community and the council on what's going on there.
That's great. Thank you. Vice Mayor, do you want to go?
I get to be the first one to say yay parade. It was really fantastic experience. And such a great way to meet the community. I mean, before, during, and after. So I really treasure that experience, and the fair as well. So you see people you haven't seen in years, and I just really love that. So that was great. I went to a school board meeting because my son was doing a presentation. That was something I haven't done in a long time. So it was, I didn't stay for the whole meeting, I have to admit, but it was nice to check in on that. And I know it's not in an official capacity in any way, but still interesting. I went to the Jane ribbon cutting event. You were there too, Councilmember Edwards. And then lots of stuff going on as a Healdsburg High School parent with graduation coming up and everything like that. Lots of little events and recognitions and so on that I'm at least on the periphery of. And so it's an exciting time for anybody who's involved in that school. And looking forward to a wonderful graduation on Friday, a big event for our family and many other families in the town.
That's great. Thank you. Councilmember Kelly?
Sure. So I attended the, well, let's see, since our last council meeting. So SMART Board of Directors, we adopted the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. And one of the items that was being discussed is the Healdsburg extension. So as you may have read, the Windsor extension is now open, even though the ribbon cutting is not for another 2 weeks. It's ready to roll, literally. So the train and the station are open in Windsor. And the ribbon cutting event for SMART, which you are all invited to, will take place on Friday the 13th, 1:30 in the afternoon. And there are really fun t-shirts that will be happening. So I unfortunately will be in San Diego for the Coastal Commission that day and unable to attend, but I hope you all are there to rah-rah for North County. And also happening, so that the Healdsburg contract is in our budget that was adopted. So they're going to be moving forward in the first quarter with allowing the planning design for the Healdsburg extension to continue and to launch a contract for that work. It's like, I think, around 2.5 million. And then also for the Healdsburg Smart extension that was discussed is that in the next 2 weeks, they'll hear back on one of the largest grant applications thus far that's in the pipeline for the Healdsburg extension. So expect to, fingers crossed, hopefully hear positive news about that grant. And if it happens, then Healdsburg and beyond, I think all the way to Geyserville, is fully funded. So knock on wood that we hear positive news on that. And they're still anticipating 2028 year end as calendar year end of 2028 as the completion date for Healdsburg's extension. So that's smart news. And then for the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, we had our meeting last week, the first of the 2 phases of the budget adoption. And in that meeting, it was the first time all 5 directors have been able to attend this year, which was a momentous occasion that we were excited about. We received the GeoZones presentation from Sonoma Clean Power. So as the only city in Sonoma County that is not a Sonoma Clean Power city because we have public utility, we have not been as actively kind of involved in the GeoZones project, but I do, because it will be happening in North County and because it is going to be a pretty massive geothermal exploration study of new sources of geothermal electricity that Sonoma Clean Power is leading. We may end up being a customer of said new geothermal at some point, who knows? I highly recommend kind of putting your ear to the ground. If you hear or see about the GeoZones project, we may, at some point want to have a presentation about it, but at the very least, it's something major that is happening in Northern Sonoma County that will have an impact in our region. So just want to plant the seed about that. It's still many, many years away, most likely. And then also at our meeting, we adopted the budget for the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District for this coming year. Everything is looking very good with the Air District. They do not receive federal funding and very limited state funding. Most of the funding comes from individuals who pay fees for burn permits or large sites like the geysers and Calpine and stuff. So when we have emitters who have to pay for permits, that's what generates the revenue to run the Air District. And so they will have a number of really great grant programs that the city is well positioned to apply for. We continue to be one of because there are only Cloverdale and Healdsburg and then unincorporated that's in our Air District, we continue to be very well situated to apply for those funds. And the city has been very successful in receiving funds from the Air District. So I think we'll continue that effort, and it looks positive in a positive economic outlook going forward. And then yes, attended the ribbon cutting of the dispensary and the parade and the fair, and really excited about opening day for the Prune Packers this Friday night. They have instituted a number of new policies for the Prune Packers games, including not having single-use plastic water bottles and other things. So excited to see how this season unfolds as we have won how many? 3 or 4? We're 4-time champions in a row, which is insane. And I'm looking forward to another great season ahead. Thanks.
I don't have much. I kind of talked about the fair already. But I did attend Edge Esmeralda had kind of a dinner. They do like a weekly Friday dinner, and it was up at Barbieri Park, my neighborhood. Went over there. A lot of people. And the next morning, took my dog for the walk like I normally do through the park. Not one single speck of garbage or trash. You wouldn't know that they were even there, except for the nice porta potties on a trailer that were waiting to be picked up. But other than that, I was really impressed. It was a great event. People having a good time hanging out on these like low little tables and just, playing hacky sack and whatever. But I was really impressed that when I walk through there, normally if there's an event or a party, the garbage cans are overflowing. None of that. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then also last week, I welcomed the Northwest Public Power Association to their conference, and that was in Santa Rosa. And that was nice to be able to, kind of catch up. We work real closely with them on some of the fire safe corridor bills and fire related issues with the Northwest Public Power Association when we're back in DC. So it's nice to catch up with them after just being with a lot of their members a month ago. So that's my report.
Thank you. So the one thing we haven't talked about is the ribbon cutting for the Purple Pipe Recycled project. And so, yeah, that was just Thursday and it was great. And I wanted to thank Director Patrick Fuse for putting together that great prop for us. It worked out really well. I was a little disappointed that we didn't have more people from the city of Healdsburg who asked us about that purple pipe over and over and over again throughout the years, not attend, but I'm sure maybe middle of the day they couldn't get there, but it was fun nevertheless. We had a lot of good people there, and and the parade. I mean, what else can we say? And thanks to the fire department for letting us use their truck. That was nice. It was a good addition. Yeah. So. Yeah, it did. Thank you very much. So with that.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
Vic was quite the driver. We got through there pretty quick.
He floored it a
I'm
couple
surprised
times.
the sirens were on.
Yeah, he was wanting it.
It was great.
Yeah, that was good. So, okay, well, with that, at 9:16, I'll